Thank you, please. Thank you. It's 6 o'clock and we're going to call the meeting to order. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll note that there is the American flag out in that direction. We can face that way, please. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Terrific. Could we take roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Widmer?
Here.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember DeGolia?
Here.
Vice Mayor Wiest?
Here.
Mayor Limpris?
Here. Okay, next on our item, we start with, we going right to council reorganization?
No,
Yes.
presentation.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Or are you going to presentations that's on schedule? Just kidding.
Yeah, there you go. I noted first that the outgoing mayor gets to deliver a message. And I know it's really crowded and you're not all here to hear that, but I am going to take a moment to do that, and I appreciate your indulgence. I will try to keep it short. What I want to do is really take a moment and just thank all the volunteers and the families who make this town work before anything else. When you spend a year as mayor, you really see what the volunteers do. It's not just committee staff, it's a number of other committees, it's a number of other things. I also want to thank most especially fellow council members, and I think we all recognize that this is a volunteer job. We put a lot of time into it, and some people who we couldn't do that without are our families, our spouses. I think we really need to thank them. So, you know, Mary Beth and Pam and Joe and Karen, thank you very much, and most especially, thank you Stephanie and Fiona for allowing us to do this. Also want to thank the town staff. And again, when you spend a year as mayor and you get to work with the town staff every day, you realize how lucky we are as residents of Atherton. Chief McCauley and City Manager Rodericks get a lot of attention, but it's not just them. There's a whole team that works quite hard, and I don't want to name them all because I'm sure I'll forget to do that. But we are in good hands. The people who are here are dedicated, knowledgeable, and really do care about the town. It's a wonderful experience when you get a chance to work with them. I also, today, will have to especially call out Steve Tyler, who is retiring after 17 years. And I don't know where Steve is out here. There he is. And Steve's been with us as Public Works Director for quite a long time, and he's added a lot to the town, and I owe him, I think we all owe him a great deal of thanks. So thank you, Steve. It's been an eventful year. I don't want to go over everything. Again, I know you're all here not to hear this, but there are two things that I want to stress that I'm actually quite proud of on behalf of the council and certainly for myself. And that is, you learn that very few projects get started and finished in a year. That just doesn't happen. So what really succeeds is a consistent vision from the town and discipline in getting it done year over year. And that's something that this council, I think, has been very good about. I think we've developed a strategic vision, we followed it year over year, and you eventually see the results. By way of example, we now have pedestrian beacons across El Camino Real. That actually took a couple of years to get done. We have obviously a lot of Civic Center progress, a lot of progress in the Civic Center. There's more of that coming. I also think that one of the things we've done really, for at least since I've been on the council, I know for a lot longer than that, is focus on regional growth and the impact on traffic around here. We've got an item on today's agenda. It's a small item, but it's RFP for a study where it shows the kind of small steps we need that over time enable us to make hopefully intelligent decisions, or at least well-informed decisions, about the direction we want to go and the things we can do to deal with in this case, traffic and the impact of regional growth on our town. It's important. The other thing I want to stress is how important I believe every member of the council and town staff believes that transparency is. And when you see a big group of people like this in the audience, it's great. I think we all feel like it's wonderful that town cares so much about issues, willing to come out and do that. And we all believe it's our job to spread the word and agree or disagree. We want to hear what people have to say. That is something that sometimes you hear people question, and we're not perfect at it, but it's deeply held within the town, and it's something I think we're very fortunate to have. I know it's something that I believe in, and if you add those two things together, a long-term vision and our dedication to transparency, it's one of the reasons that I'm very proud of what we accomplished last year, and I'm actually very confident that as I look forward to see what we're going to accomplish next year. So, thank you. Shall we now go to selection of mayor and vice mayor?
Yes, I will open nominations for mayor.
I'm happy to nominate. Would you like to nominate?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I have the honor of nominating Mr. Kerry Wiest.
Second.
So-
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Sounds like
Wow.
it's a
There you
5-0.
go. Gary.
It feels like there's been a little transition here.
Well, I kind of gotten used to the corner seat with the leg right in front of me, but I'll give it to you. Through the clerk, can we go ahead and start nominations for vice mayor, please?
Certainly, I'll open the nominations for vice mayor.
Elizabeth.
I'd like to open the nomination and nominate for the position of Vice Mayor for 2018, Councilmember DeGolia, and for the following reasons. Councilmember DeGolia represents our town with integrity, professionalism, and passion, and works tirelessly on projects that enhance and protect our residents in our town. He serves on both local committees as well as regional boards, such as the Atherton Liaison to the Peninsula Clean Energy Board, deciding on renewable energy sources for our Atherton residents to use through PG&E. He gives not only with his time and talents, but also has generously donated to the Newtown Center project and contributed to the 2 ballot measure campaigns we launched this year, Measure A and Measure F, and also worked on both of those. He regularly opens his home for town events and parties and is widely respected in the community at large. He's thoughtful in his deliberations, he's collaborative and works towards consensus. He works well with all staff and other colleagues, and in my opinion, Councilmember DeGolia would make a great vice mayor for Atherton 2018.
Thank you. Any other nominations for vice mayor, please?
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate the nomination, but I would like to nominate Bill Widmer. I think that Bill has been on this council for a long time. He's a really serious contributor. When you do this work, it's very hard to understand the detail in the volume of paper that we get. And there's nobody that studies it more thoroughly than Bill, and I count on his assessment in the course of that. And I'd like to nominate Bill.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
You looking for seconds or?
So the first nomination was for Councilmember DeGolia. Is there a second? So if there's no second, then we'll move on to the next nomination, which is for Councilmember Widmer. Is there a second?
I'm happy to second. No.
I'll second.
So I have a motion and a second. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Congratulations. I don't know if you want to give up your seat, but it looks like you're pretty rested.
I don't have a leg there, you know.
In full disclosure, Bill would normally have a tie, but
Where's it going?
hey, just pick it
Oh,
up.
we're gonna do this.
Yes, thanks, the audience.
Oh, my God.
And then raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Kerry Wiest,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I bear true faith and allegiance
that I bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Can't stop.
talking because your mouth was always open.
That's hard to accomplish. I don't know if I'll take any offense to that.
Sure. That was good to get. Thank you. Keep going.
All right, I want to thank everybody for attending and thanking everybody for attending our reorganization. I know there are a couple things on the agenda that we are all looking forward to vetting here. I was asked to keep it brief. Actually, if I, not expecting anything, but if I was to be prepared, it was to be brief because somebody says I talk too much. Won't say who it is. So I want to start by thanking my fellow council. I want to start by thanking my fellow council members and honoring me as the role of mayor. We are a good team. We work well together in the interest of the town of Atherton. It has been my pleasure working with former mayor now, Mike Lemprest. He has done an admirable job at balancing his responsibilities as mayor and his profession, and most importantly, his family. We all are very familiar with Fiona. She is the pseudo-mayor if he's not around. In brief, next year's priorities have already been set. The Civic Center project, the water capture facility, and the fire services review. There are a few additional things in 2018 that the council is also working on, which is a heritage tree ordinance, a look at general plan, website upgrades, traffic studies, and drainage studies. As a town, we are known for housing our wealthy. While that is true, on a daily perspective, we are known as a community of schools with over 7,000 kids. Our resources are limited, but we try to improve our safe routes to schools, promote traffic safety, and programs and support communication links between the town and schools. Next year, finally on April 9th, 2018, under the leadership of Chief McCauley, the Atherton Police Department will be doing an active shooter exercise at the Menlo School. This exercise has taken months of coordination and will be a joint exercise with multiple agencies. It'll probably be the first in the south portion of this county. So we'd like to take leadership roles. It's difficult with the resources we have, with all the students we have. So with what is going on in society today, we have just put forth an effort to try to, we don't want anything to occur, but with the chief's leadership to get our team, our police team to engage. So I just want to thank everybody. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and move on to the presentation for our retiring Steve Tyler. Steve Tyler, proclamation. Now, I thought this was a roast, so I wrote something totally different. So, apparently in the public sector, you can't do a roast, which those of you that are old enough to know what a roast is, Fiona, you will never know what a roast is. In the public sector, we have a little different view. So, Steve, if you can come on over here. I'm going to read this proclamation, which I want you to look at. This is where the warm seat is. And because I didn't write the roast, I had a few things that I wanted to add this week, but I've already told Steve privately what they are. And it's not often that we see Steve with a jacket that isn't camo or something to that effect. So, proclamation. City Council of the Town of Atherton, in recognition of Steve Tyler. Whereas Steve Tyler has spent 36 years serving the public sector, including 19 years with Caltrans, 17 years with the town of Atherton as Public Works Superintendent. And whereas Steve, in his role as Public Works Superintendent, is responsible for the direction and oversight of all public works maintenance functions and activities, which include streets, traffic control, underground lines, and facilities, park infrastructure maintenance, and preventative maintenance and safety programs, and support of budget and capital improvement projects and projects. Whereas he hasn't fixed this squeak yet, so Jeff, you can't wait until this squeak. I feel like I'm going, okay, it's like an earthquake, like a boat. Whereas Steve is reliable, dedicated, supportive, generous, and always strives to get better and do better. Steve is a jack of all trades, includes an arborist, a park whisperer, Those of you that know that's so true. Steve is on it, whether it's sprinklers, door locks, rose garden not ready, or a statue ready to fall. And whereas the town could always count on Steve to provide a calm, dependable, rational approach to solutions. The city manager is quoted in saying, Steve is always does what's necessary to make something successful. He looked towards solutions, not problems, as creatively as he needed to be. And whereas, they wrote enough whereases in this, I'm going to retire when I'm done. Whereas Steve is the type of person that has created a lot of positive goodwill with residents by being thoughtful, considerate in dealing with their concerns, being very responsive and taking time with patience to explain the town could or could not perform a task. Even though some may not like the answer, he's always appreciated Steve's attention, or they always appreciated Steve's attention and explanation. And whereas, last one, Steve has always been respectful and professional in his role as town public works superintendent, where he's provided leadership in the public works department, which has been without a director for more than 6 years. I, in the virtue and authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Atherton, do hereby commend Steve Tyler and express my sincere appreciation for his service to the town of Atherton community and congratulate him on his retirement. So, Steve, you're not getting away without some goodies, and we know you probably won't wear this hat much, because in retirement, I'm sure it's more going to be a net for fishing or something to that effect. But we have a hat for you, signed by everybody.
That's so great. Thank you very much.
You have one
It's signed by everybody. That's awesome. Thank you.
You have the same color, but just now all the notes and good wishes. So,
I must admit, I'm a little touched. Thank you. Appreciate it.
any of my colleagues have anything else that they would like to say to Steve? Or I know some of you have been here before.
It's a long meeting.
Don't
I mean, not very
drink
short
all
meeting.
this stuff at one
So,
time.
if I could say something and then get this over with,
Please.
just because I have to, I'd just like to thank this council, especially being here 16 years. You've gotten more done than any other council that I've dealt with, and I'm sure the town appreciates that. And I know in Public Works we certainly did. To my colleagues from Mike Kashiwagi, Marty, George, Bill, Teresa, Robert, Lisa, it's just been a pleasure working with you guys, and I know the council realizes what a great team they have, because I'm from George down, just a fantastic team of people here. So, and of course my family, my wife Karen. I've got my daughter Courtney over here, and my son Alex, and thanks for being here, and thanks for all the support through the years. Sometimes I came home and needed one of those. But, for the most part, it's always been my pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for providing me a great living to be able to raise my family and enter retirement. Thank you very much.
That was one of the most calls I've gotten all week, is the sadness in people's residents seeing that Steve was, once we made notification that he was retiring, other than trees. That was one of the most amount of calls I've gotten related to an employee, in a positive way.
For the party.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move to the oath of office. I think the chief is stepping in.
I'm ready, Mayor. So Christie and Chris, if you join me up here. So the favorite part of my job, by far, is when we can hire new people and promote people. That brings in a lot of energy, and we're really excited about these two. So, without further ado, if you raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Chris Brennan,
do solemnly swear that I will support and defend
do solemnly swear that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I bear true faith and allegiance
that I bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
to the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of California,
the Constitution of the State of California,
and to take this obligation freely
and I take this obligation freely
without mental reservation
without mental reservations
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations. Ladies first, so Chris, if you would park yourself over there. And I just want to introduce Christy Cisco. She's our new communications dispatcher and police records specialist. She comes to us with extensive background in police support experience. She worked for the Menlo Police Department from 1990 to 2003 as an Explorer Cadet, Community Service Officer, Records Clerk, Level 1 Reserve Police Officer, and Dispatcher. In the mid-1990s, Christy was a per diem dispatcher for the town of Atherton, so we do welcome her back to our family. From 2003 to 2012, worked for the Santa Cruz Regional 911 Center and was cross-trained as a law enforcement EMS dispatcher as well. And recently, from 2015 to 17, she worked for San Mateo County Communications until we stole her back from them. She holds a bachelor's degree in liberal studies and has a teenage daughter, Alexa, who's here.
Yeah.
And in her spare time, she enjoys cycling, running, and reading when she's not working only many hours for us. And she's delighted to be back in Atherton and with her family, and we're delighted to have her back too. So I'd like to have Alexa come up and pin the badge on. She was back there practicing.
Perfect.
Beautiful.
Yes, yes.
Don't need a red sleeve in it.
Hold on. That was my Band-Aid. If I didn't do it. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good job. Congratulations. Officer Green.
Sir?
So this is Officer Chris Green. He began work with us on December 5th. Officer Green graduated from Amador Valley High School in Pleasanton, later attended Humboldt State University where he earned a bachelor's degree in speech communication and public relations. He comes to the department with 18 years of law enforcement experience. He started in 1999 with the Escalon Police Department, later the San Benito County Sheriff's Office, and for the last 10 years, an officer with Watsonville. As an example of his experience, he served as a patrol officer, field training officer, general crimes detective, coroner investigator, detective sergeant, patrol sergeant, crimes against children, sexual assault detective, and training manager. You should just do my job. Talk about experience with both of our people. Officer Green is recently married to his wonderful wife, Stacy, who I got to meet earlier, and together they have 4 children, Abigail, Nathaniel, Carson, and Kendall. And Officer Green's excited to become part of the Atherton police team. Both of them have so much experience, and Christy's been here before. We've been in the area. They literally hit the ground running, and we are very lucky to have them on board. So congratulations. Do you have the badge?
Do you have it? It's like leaving the ring. Ow!
Figured out who the town photographer was.
Yeah.
There you go.
We
Yeah.
got priorities.
She's a priority.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please.
you might give an opportunity for those that are here for that sort of thing to,
Absolutely. Anybody that was here for the previous, that wants to exit, we'll give you an opportunity to. Perfect. Gives more room for people to come in. Sorry, we're shifting. You're welcome. Thank you very much for attending. Congratulations. All right. We're shifting the body heat. All right, so let's go ahead and open the floor to any public comments that are not, or any item that is not on the agenda. So anybody would like to have speak to any item not on the agenda? Please, Paul.
May I speak to an item on the agenda, but I have another meeting that I have to attend, and I'll make it short.
What I can do, well, the city attorney's looking at me with the legal eagle eye.
Well, I don't want to do anything illegal.
Mr. Connors?
Is it prison for Paul? Is it
I think that he's got something else to do that's important. We can make an exception to the rule.
Please, thank you very much. Paul, please.
Thank you. Just a few comments. This is about the 46-foot poles that Caltrain wants to put over next to Lloyden Park. They're offering two reasons that they have to do this. The first is that it minimizes the trees, and it's already been demonstrated that what we're talking about there is one tree. The second reason is that the design is too far complete, and it would be expensive for them to make any changes. And this is nonsense. They have finished their 65% design, but they have not even published that yet. We're still waiting to meet with them. And I would be absolutely amazed if their contractor doesn't have all of their drawings digitized. And to make the changes necessary to change those poles in a digitized environment takes no time and virtually no expense. So that is nonsense. It is my personal belief that Caltrain is trying to punish Atherton for our opposition to some of their past activities. And of course, the most egregious thing they have done is to give away all the potential for growth on the peninsula, on the commuter railroad to high-speed rail by putting them on their tracks. And I think that is a betrayal of the peninsula, and I do believe that we should do everything, I encourage you to do everything you can to keep them from putting these 46-foot poles out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I thank the city attorney for allowing that exception. Any other public comments on any item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comments, and I'm going to move to item number 6, which is the city manager's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, you have the written report in your agenda packet. I'm happy to answer any questions, as well as staff. We're here tonight for that. But in the interest of time, I don't have an extended report.
Thank you. Any of my colleagues have any additional questions for the city manager? Any members of the public, any interest in any comments related to the city manager's report? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close those. And any final comments by council? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close this and move on to, there is no community roundtable. We're going to move on to the consent agenda, items number 8 through 17. Would any of my colleagues like to pull any item or add a comment to any item that is on the consent agenda? Please.
I would like to make a comment and a question on item number 13, which also is kind of in number 15 also. Can I just go ahead
Please,
and ask it?
go ahead.
Mr. Kashawagi, in the analysis, the proposal for the traffic study between Alameda Dallas Pulgas, on Alameda Dallas Pulgas between Valparaiso and Woodside Road, I thank you very much for this. I think that the information is going to be really good if we do the correct data collection. And I noticed that they are proposing to use the INRIX, I-N-R-I-X, mega data. Is the consultant here by chance, or?
No.
No? Okay. And so I know that on the CMAC, CCAG board, we've received data analysis from INRIX, where they're testing hours of travel on 101 between Santa Clara to San Mateo, and everyone in our committee said those hours, that data is just wrong. It's just wrong. It's a metadata kind of collection, and it's not actual counts. So I would just hope that, I know we're gonna pass this, I want to, but I just want to make sure that we're just not gonna use metadata that's collected by GPS to give us our results along that stretch. I want actual counts, I want the month that the data is collected and the times of the count that are really critical. I mean, it makes all the difference in the world. So, I mean, if you read the proposal, they're proposing to use index.
Right, but they're supposed to also use tube counts, hose counts, and turn counts, so there's additional counting things that they're going to be using.
But it's really easy to pull that
But
index
we'll
data.
keep a very close eye on that.
Okay.
Okay. Councilman, or Vice Mayor Whitmer.
Sure. Specifically with regards to item 13, which is Alameda de los Fogos study. In reading the study, you know, it talks a lot about maximizing the throughput. And as we've discussed many, many times at this meeting, you know, we're not, especially when our two neighbors to the north and south are shrinking the roads, maximizing it makes no sense. And actually, we've expressed several times that we're not really into maximizing. We prefer not to have a bunch of cut-through traffic. And so the report talked a lot about maximizing the throughput of the traffic, and I just want to make sure that what we're looking at is really, given what may happen or what is proposed to being happen in the other two neighborhoods, and the fact that we were thinking about perhaps a light at that school, what's that going to do to the rest of the traffic as far as any further backups, is it going to help or whatever, but not maximize. I mean, we don't want to put more cars through that area. So I brought that up with the city manager, and I just want to bring that up to y'all. That's not what we're looking for, and that's what their proposal seems to be saying over and over again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other?
Item 12.
Item 12.
I guess it's a comment, a question. I'm concerned that what we're doing, it appears that what we're doing is making it easier for someone to develop a parcel of property which is partially in Atherton, and giving up our ability to control that development to the, I would think, the negative impact, or the potential negative impact to the neighbors to that piece of property. And the process doesn't appear to have been, it certainly didn't seem to go through the planning committee or anyone else. It seems to have come straight here. And it makes me uncomfortable that we're doing that. I'd love to, I guess, ask the question of Lisa, what process was followed? Did the neighbors get any notice of this? Or whoever, please.
No, this process does not require specific neighborhood notification. It is kind of tricky, though, to deal with a piece of property that's split by a jurisdiction. That rarely occurs, and so when it does occur and we see it, we want to try to resolve it. However, it's really to the desire of the property owner. So we had another one, I know, up past Alameda de los Fogos, that they wanted to annex into the town because their property was split as well. So in that situation, we annexed it in. In this situation, they evaluated how they could develop in Atherton, how they could develop in the county, and the larger portion of the property is in the county, so they feel it makes more sense for them to remain in the county.
Yeah, there was no actual land use application that the town received
That's correct.
for anything connected to the property, and the only touching that we have with it is this tax resolution. But
Well, let me go back to the point, though. If they want it in the county, there's a reason they want it in the county, which presumably is they can develop it more, which may have an impact on the neighbors who haven't been consulted at all in this process. I actually think, can we pull that and discuss it?
Sure,
Apologies.
absolutely. We're going to go ahead and pull item number 12 for further discussion. Councilman Whitmer, or Rick, any more comments?
No, but I'd like to take that item up at the end of the agenda.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Pull it to the end. So 12 will go to the end. Thank you. I actually have one comment, and it's more of a process issue and a transparency issue, and it's really for the clerk related to item number 10. Can we obtain the most current precinct map and the proper precinct polling areas?
Yes.
Because based on what we were provided, it does not appear that the entire layer of Atherton was treated as precinct counts. So because they combined areas, which they do, even the county's website doesn't publish the proper map.
They do that.
Right. So if we just make sure that the record shows the map, and for any future issues, that a proper map is at least within a staff report to eliminate any confusion for our residents as well as us.
Thank you. Nice to have bigger print.
Yes.
And per Elizabeth,
I'm
could you get
sorry.
bigger print?
Yeah.
I've got magnifiers on, but
So can I get or I apologize, any comments or any items from the public to remove any item that's on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'm going to come back to council. Can I get a motion to approve items 1 through 17 with the exception of item number 12?
so moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much on that. We will be, if anybody's interested in the outcome of item number 12, we will have that at the end of the agenda after, in the interest of everybody standing here. So let's go ahead and, there is no public hearing, but we're going to go on to the regular agenda, item number 18, which is the Caltrain electrification project, and discuss and provide input, Caltrain regarding preference of the overhead contact system pole design where center poles cannot be used within the town of Atherton. Mike Oshwagi and everybody else will chime in as well. Please.
I don't have any additional information than it's in the report. However, I do want to clarify that the visuals that was included in the report showing the single and double cantilever poles was provided simply so the council can see what the differences were. These visuals do not, nor were they intended to represent the height difference or visual impact differences between these two different pole types. I just wanted to clarify that.
They were provided by Caltrain?
Yes, they were provided by Caltrain.
Question about that. So how are we to evaluate? I mean, you're saying that they're not really the design or the element, that's not what they're really going to look like?
Well, no, they are going to look like that, but the pole heights are not representative of a 35-foot high pole versus a...
But that's what we're trying
Discussing.
to
Well, and we have two representatives from Caltrain here today from the project team, Leonard Warren and Rich Walter. And they can answer this, but I do not believe a visual like that exists today. One thing that we do know is that for the single track cantilever, the pole height is estimated to be 32 to 35 feet. And for the double track cantilever, those poles will be 45 feet 6 inches. So there's basically a 10 to 12 foot height difference between the two poles.
Please.
And the other thing that is, I think, interesting in the visuals is that there's discussion about the double pole having a huge base, like the footing is much bigger than the single pole. But if you kind of look at them, I mean, it's impossible to compare. I mean, they don't look like they're that much difference.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to answer that question too. And as far as what we've seen so far on the design, the difference between a foundation size and a double track cantilever versus a single track is about 6 inches.
6 inches. 6
Correct.
inches in diameter?
6 inches in diameter. The typical foundation size for single track cantilever is 36 inches, while the typical, I'll say, the bigger foundation that we have seen so far for a double track is 42 inches.
And how about the depth?
The depth will vary. The
Mr.
depth
Mayor?
really more
Please.
depends on.
We haven't opened it to the public yet. And
Yeah, no.
Unless you have a specific question, because now we're getting members of the public starting to chime in too. It's not a debate yet until...
It'll soon become that. So any other council members have questions for either staff or apparently Caltrain? Seeing none.
Well, I'm sorry,
Please.
clarifying questions or?
Any questions?
At our last meeting, Caltrain, with the president, thank you very much for coming, by the way. We asked whether Caltrain would be willing to work with the city and in what ways Caltrain would be willing to work with the city to make sure that we got input and that our input was considered as between these two. Could you please just address that?
Sure. I think certainly we have met. We took some additional information that was requested at the last meeting. Met with the rail committee to kind of present the information, the impacts to the trees, and the differences between the single and double track cantilever. I think really what we're looking for today is we are looking to see if there's a recommendation here from the council. If there is an official recommendation, we would like to receive that officially, I think, from the town, for which then the Caltrain will go back and consider what the impacts are for us from a design, from a cost, and from a schedule perspective. And we can then continue to work with the staff here to make some decisions about whether we'll be making those changes based on your recommendation.
So the commitment is to consider what we request.
That's correct.
So it sounds like there's some flexibility. Commitment, flexibility, consideration.
We're going to take it back for consideration, certainly.
So nothing locked in stone?
What we want to do is we want to do kind of a all-around analysis. We want to have all the information, such as what the schedule impact is, what the cost differential is, and be able to take that information and present it to your staff, get the official recommendation, so that we can then have a discussion of whether or not that change is viable.
Perfect. Vice Mayor Whitner?
Yeah, I think when we first started talking about the electrification, there was a question on the number of trees that were going to come down. And the input to the city, correct me if I'm wrong, but the input from the city was if there's a significant number of trees that are going to come down, then we want you to, minimize that. At what point did you determine that there was one tree only that was being affected? And that, by the way, that tree isn't actually native to this area, it's a eucalyptus.
Yeah. So, through this, Rich Walter with ICF, I'm a consultant to Caltrain.
Please.
So obviously we went through the CEQA process, and at the draft we had kind of a worst case analysis that had a couple hundred trees, I believe, being affected in Atherton. We refined that a bit in the final, it came down a bit, and then we had mitigation, and the mitigation basically said reduce trees. The city had certainly said use center poles as much as possible in Atherton. So we went into the design process, and we're able to put center poles in most of Atherton, except in this one area on the north side where there isn't sufficient track space there. And so at that point, then you're looking at options in that area. It's about 1,000 feet long. And then the analysis of the standard sort of side poles versus the double track cantilevers. The difference is a net of pruning of 11 additional trees and the removal of 1 tree. So that's how we got to this point that we're at.
But when? When did you get to that point? When did you realize that it would only affect 1 tree with what you're doing?
So the design that came in was on the side pole design. No, it was a double track cantilever is what the design came in. Because when we're looking in Atherton, as well as in other cities where we have lots of trees lining the tracks, we were always looking at an option to lower them. So that was part of the design that BVI was doing to bring us to this point. So the fact of the difference between them is just in the last couple of months when we heard requests of, hey, what would happen if we didn't do the double track? So that was just recently in the last month or so.
Okay. Councilmember DeGoya.
Okay, so you guys have looked at that in response to the mitigation effort at the option between these 2 poles and the impact that would have on the trees. And I understand that it's only within the last month that you were able to complete that analysis and figure out the number of trees impacted. Are there, and you're at 65% design, is that correct?
That's correct.
And are there other communities on the Caltrain track where you are in your 65% design currently planning to deploy the double cantilever poles?
Yes, there are. In fact, so far, we have already installed some foundations, as we had mentioned in the last meeting, up in segment 2, work area 5, which is the South San Francisco, San Bruno, and into the northern part of Millbrae. There are double track cantilever foundations that have been installed into the ground, which they're essentially planning for the double tracks to be put up at a later date.
Okay. So on that, when do you predict or plan that you're going to hit Atherton, provided there are no changes?
If the best estimation that I have based on kind of the latest contractor's schedule, I would say probably maybe the middle part of 2018 or so is what we're looking at. They're still working on completion of the design. That's one thing. As you mentioned, it's at 65%. They have potholing that they have to do in advance of the installation of foundations. And the other thing I will just caveat, contractor schedule is, as many of you know, it can be fluid. It depends on their progress and how they're doing in other work areas. So that's just my best estimation at this point, certainly. We can work with your staff to keep them up to date on where we think the date is going to come around when we start coming in and installing foundations. But certainly prior to that, one of the things they will want to do is complete the potholing and any field investigation in advance of the foundation installation.
Just to get that, so the middle half of 2018 is 6 months from now.
That's just my best estimation at this point based on their progress. I unfortunately didn't bring a copy of
No, I understand, but the potholing and the other work, is that going to be a month before that?
It depends. It really depends on how they schedule it. It could be a month, it could be 2-3 months before that. Typically, they like to do the potholing with enough time so that if they find any kind of, I'll say, conflicts out in the field with utilities, they can go ahead and make the changes prior to coming out in the field.
So then I'd point out that would start then 3 months from now.
I can get you some more details. That's certainly I can
That
go
just
back
seems,
and
that's
look at.
pretty soon in government work. That's not
Yep, I
way
can
out
look
there.
at it.
Okay.
Councilwoman Lewis.
Yes. And just to clarify, you've made the design per a double cantilever.
The current design is a double.
Instead of the lower impact of a smaller footprint foundation in the single.
The current design is a double track cantilever instead of 2 single.
Which is a single pole, not a, yeah, it's double cantilever, it kind of implied, almost sounds just.
It's a single
Right, but it's a bigger foundation that may have more impact to root systems of adjacent trees, which I don't think has been taken into consideration. And that's what the potholing would determine. Is that correct?
The 6 inches, we think would have a nominal effect on roots.
The depth, same depth? You got a taller pole?
The depth is, I can't really answer a depth question without getting into further design. The depth really varies depending on the geotechnical soil conditions, essentially.
Sure.
But yes, a double track cantilever likely will be a deeper foundation than a single.
In it.
single.
So what do you think our odds are if we decided, just hypothetically, that we wanted the shorter poles on either side of the track and instead of the larger poles, and the one tree that's going to be impacted with the 10 poles, you say now is a eucalyptus tree? Is that,
I'd have to check. I don't know that offhand. I have no reason to know.
I mean, I don't know if I have that information in front of me.
Well, that information is in the staff report,
Is
which
it?
we received from Kelly.
Oh, okay.
But- And then just to clarify, it's 1 tree removed, 2 trees pruned more than 25%.
That's right.
And
11.
11 trimmed 25%.
Yeah, the net difference is actually 11 trees pruned 0 to 24%.
Uh-huh.
One more tree, one net new tree, pruned 25 to 39%, and 1 tree that was being pruned heavily before and would now be removed.
So can I just say something?
No,
'Cause I'm very confused.
not yet. Hold, please. I know you're going to be here. The gates are almost open. Just a point of clarity on Mike's question. When we're talking about the footings, you're talking about in advance roughly 3 months prior. Is it core sampling to determine the depth of the footing? Is that really what you're doing?
No, so the potholing in this case is for identification of any potential underground utility conflicts.
Okay.
It's done with a non-intrusive vacuum method. What Caltrans has wanted to avoid is to come out and start drilling and then drill into an unknown utility and cause any sort of potential damage to that utility with a drill operator. Using the vacuum truck to come out and making that identification ahead of time, you avoid the risk of hitting an underground utility.
So depth of footing occurs when you're doing the actual foot?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Any other questions from council or staff for that matter? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open this up to comments from the public, and I actually have orchestrated a little bit of an event here. We have somebody that can represent a larger portion of the group to eliminate some of the, there's going to be a lot of consistency, and we've set up a little plan.
Yes, we have a
Sharon,
plan.
please.
Hi, my name is Sharon Hume, and I'm a resident of Lloyden Park. I live at 23 Below Avenue, and I actually just, did I say 23? Elise lives at 23. We don't live
It's the pressure of public speaking.
We do get each other's mail. Okay, so I live at 73 Below, and I actually do back right up onto the train tracks. But I am talking to you tonight on behalf of the Lloyden Park Homeowners Association, of which I have recently been elected the new president of.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. So, first, as the president of the Homeowners Association of Lloyden Park, in conjunction with many of my colleagues here who are my neighbors in Lloyden Park, I would like, first of all, to express our collective objection to Caltrans' use of the 46-foot double cantilever track poles for the electrification on the stretch of tracks that runs adjacent to our neighborhood. Secondly, the Homeowners Association of Lloyden Park would like to echo our support for the unanimous recommendations made by the Atherton Rail Committee at their December 5th meeting, of which a copy of that report is included in the council person's packet tonight. And their recommendation is to deploy the 30-foot single-track cantilever poles for electrification throughout this corridor wherever the center single pole cannot be used. And thirdly, and most importantly, the Homeowners Association of Lloyden Park respectfully requests that you, the Atherton Town Council, support us by formally opposing Caltrans' use of the 46-foot poles in the track corridor that is adjacent to our neighborhood. As a homeowners association, as residents of Lloyden Park, we are very deeply concerned that the 46-foot poles create an unacceptable visual and aesthetic impact to not only the town, but to the adjacent residents, which has also been highlighted by the Atherton Rail Committee report. Common sense dictates that the sheer size of these poles would be difficult to ignore and impossible to camouflage in the near term. I don't know of many trees, even a eucalyptus, that's going to grow that high in that short amount of time. In addition, we believe that these larger poles will require the larger diameter hole, maybe just 6 inches, but as Councilman Lewis pointed out, they may go much, much deeper, which could potentially impact the root system of many of the adjacent trees. And then we're also concerned about the larger base that's going to have, the larger cantilever pole across the tracks. Basically, since shorter poles have a smaller impact and are easier to camouflage, they will disappear more quickly. We can get something, growing quickly. We do realize that it was Caltrain's goal to minimize the impact to existing trees. But one tree that's not even a native tree for us is sort of immaterial. This cost-benefit trade-off of saving one tree at the expense of the substantial visual, aesthetic, financial, and safety costs to our neighborhood just is senseless to us. If tree pruning is the problem being solved, the 46-foot pole cure is worse than the problem. Saving one tree does not, in our eyes, justify a 50% increase in pole size for the entire neighborhood corridor. We have previously voiced our opposition as a homeowners association to the Caltrain December 7th monthly Joint Powers Board meeting, where we hand-delivered our formal letter of objection, which was signed by 64 Lloyden Park property owners. Caltrain responded to us that they're currently in discussion, as we heard tonight, with the town of Atherton and don't have a final decision. Our ask of you, as our representatives of all our citizens, is that you advise Caltrain that on no uncertain terms, in this particular stretch of the tracks, that they only use 30-foot poles, and state that the council strongly rejects any design that includes the 46-foot poles. Not only will the use of this industrial-sized solution in the area that he's talking about up in South San Francisco is much more of an industrial neighborhood. It's going to compromise the quaint character of our neighborhood, but we can also imagine that any other Atherton resident, regardless of where they live, would want to see the equivalent of a four-story height building anywhere on the tracks, even if it's a skinny little building. While we're very concerned about the aesthetics and the visual impacts of it, we also are equally concerned about the financial and the safety and the design issues. So at this time, in support of what Carrie was saying about trying to consolidate our comments, I would like to call on 3 of my neighbors to talk about these issues. I'm going to call upon David Barca, who is one of the local realtors, to talk about the impact on the property values, John Malbeck to talk about the safety issues, and Narissa Dexter, who will talk about our concerns with Caltrains, and she's been very involved in this design process to date. Thank you for your concern, and David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, can we try to keep it within 3 minutes?
We will.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Make it louder.
Good evening. My name is David Barca. I live at 23 Below with Sharon. My wife. Sorry about that. And I've been an Atherton resident almost 36 years. I'm also a residential real estate professional, serving as a practitioner, a manager, a supervising broker, an owner, an investor, an officer for local Menlo Park and Atherton companies for over 25 years. As a complete aside, I also spent time with British Rail as a consultant, should those services ever be needed in the future. So, anyway, members of the council, I was struck by the conclusion of the Rail Committee in their December 5th meeting, where they unanimously recommended a single-track cantilever design and emphasized the height of the double cantilever poles created an unacceptable visual and aesthetic impact for the town and the adjacent residents. I also note that the Caltrain stated rationale for utilizing the double-track cantilever design versus the single-track cantilever design was to minimize the impacts onto existing trees. My point, those impacts to trees have been charted for the committee, explained even this evening for the benefit of the council. However, the Rail Committee's comments with the regarding the aesthetic impact have not been addressed, to my knowledge, in any written form. I also note no comparison of single and double track poles from a safety perspective. And I mentioned this, that these 2 points, safety and aesthetics, are exactly the concerns of the average home buyer when considering a purchase of a home near the railroad tracks. Currently, the primary concern people mention when they purchase real estate near railroad tracks is the sound of passing trains. People living on the tracks will attest to the fact that outdoor conversations stop when the train passes, and indoor conversations will generally pause. The electrification may help the auditory portion of this problem, but clearly creates and likely expands the unacceptable visual impact deeper into the adjacent neighborhood. If that is the case, then the entire neighborhood is blighted and potentially scratched from consideration of would-be buyers. Over the last 2 years, 59 homes have been sold in the area of Atherton, bordered by Middlefield Road and El Camino Real. 13 of those homes are either on the tracks or one home removed from the tracks. Compared to the overall area, which includes these same properties, homes on or one home removed from the tracks take 15% longer to sell at 20% less per square foot, and have a 24% lower average selling price. And this isn't a great market, by the way. So the market changes, that changes as well. I'm almost finished. That's okay. If all else remains the same, the 45.6 or 45.5 foot poles are installed, then the impact of the homes adjacent to the tracks is unknown at this time. But it can be stated with some certainty that the visual perimeter effect of the railway will be extended to additional homes now inside of the poles, and they too will suffer similar impact of days on market, less money per square foot, and lower than average selling prices. If the entire neighborhood is labeled as less desirable, then the impact will be felt by all homeowners. As a tree hugger by nature, I applaud the effort to save even one single tree, eucalyptus or otherwise. However, the visual aesthetic and predicted damage to private property cannot be denied, and in my opinion far outweighs the marginal benefit of saving a single tree.
Thank you, Dave. John?
Hi, I'm John Malbech. I live at 90 Lloyden Drive, and I was asked to address the safety issues because I was alleged to have an extensive engineering background. I do have an extensive engineering background. But I think it's worth saying that any rigorous, detailed engineering discussion that I might put in front of you would not lead you any place that common sense and intuition would lead anybody in this room. Bigger, heavier poles, weigh more, they exert more force on the foundation. Bigger, heavier cantilevers twist more, they exert larger bending moments on the foundation. Well, Caltrain knows that, so they put in a bigger foundation. Is that sufficient to reduce the risk, and not just the risk, but the consequences of a failure if they do occur, of this bigger foundation? Well, I'm not qualified to quantify that. But my suggestion is that the difference in the risk and the consequences, whatever it is not zero. And I would say that based on information that Caltrain gave us at the Rail Committee meeting on December 5th, that they agree with me. They said that they don't like, or don't prefer at least, the double track cantilevers because they introduce an increased potential for disruption of service. Because if they fall, they take out both directions instead of just one. Well, presumably also if they fall, the 46-foot top takes wires with high voltage in it further out, possibly into neighboring vegetation, possibly creating a fire. I can't quantify any of that, but I think it's true. So, in my original thoughts, I was going to go from there and say also, since we're talking about poles, let's do a little cost-benefit analysis. And I'm sure councils do cost-benefit analyses all the time. But you've heard that already. But just to summarize, the cost of more expensive poles, poles with a higher risk of disruption of service, and the imposition of industrial strength infrastructure on a neighborhood that is not in the least industrial is a cost, and the benefit is one tree. If this weren't a serious discussion, that would be a joke. And so what I'm suggesting is that the council take a strong stand for common sense and a strong stand, as Sharon so eloquently put it, in support of the neighborhood that you guys represent.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Narissa, the gate is open. And can I know this is going to be dead, try to limit it to.
I've got a very brief discussion. I would like to know, does anybody have, I'm sorry, I have a cold. Does anybody have a question as to what the actual tree impact is? It is one tree, net, one tree extra will be cut down, and 11 additional trees will be lightly to moderately pruned, period. That is the sum total of the impact of switching to the standard. This gentleman used the term standard, which has been used by Caltrain repeatedly, the standard outside poles. Okay, and with that, I'd like to cover a few things. Let me get into this, and I have photographs of actual double-track cantilever installation in Denver. And I can talk about, I have photos and I'll show you that at the end. Lighting the community with poles 50% taller than necessary contradicts a fundamental aspect of Caltrain's new business plan development, which is to undertake a community interface assessment with a stated objective of identifying, minimizing, and mitigating impacts wherever Caltrain's assets impinge upon communities. Caltrain has initiated this new business plan development as a prerequisite for asking voters to approve a ballot measure to increase sales tax permanently and independently to fund Caltrain. In its current form, dated today, the business plan states as one of its major goals to, quote, work with Caltrain's partners and local jurisdictions to develop a community interface strategy that shows options for maximizing the community benefits the service vision creates while minimizing and mitigating impacts, unquote. Accordingly, we ask Caltrain to demonstrate its commitment to this business plan by foregoing the unnecessary double-track cantilever poles in our community. In a November 15 meeting, not of the City Council, but in an earlier meeting of that same day, Caltrain stated it actually prefers installing the 30-foot outside poles for two reasons. One, Caltrain said it is cheaper for them. Two, in case of catastrophic event, they could continue service using the other 30-foot pole. Therefore, Caltrain should be positively inclined to forego the 46-foot double-track cantilevers. Caltrain also stated in the reference meeting that there will be 8 to 9 of the 46-foot poles in Atherton, not 5. Switching to the 30-foot poles could become an integral part of developing its 95% engineering plan because many changes will have to be incorporated in that plan. Caltrain said in the same meeting that no consideration had been given to the aesthetic impact when it specified the 46-foot poles to its design-build contractor. This violates their environmental impact report's mitigation measure AES-2B, which requires Caltrain to select a pole design, quote, to blend with the surrounding built and natural environments as much as possible. In this way, the 46-foot poles violate Caltrain's EIR. A single pole will have to be removed and 11 trees lightly to moderately pruned as the trade-off for preventing the unnecessary blight of Lloyden Park and the surrounding areas by poles which are planned to be 50% taller than necessary. That is the end of my statement. What I just wanted to show is this is the diagram, which I think you all have. It is the actual engineering drawing that Caltrain supplied to us. And this shows the 46-foot pole. And what is critical, unlike the photographs which were included in the staff report, what this shows is that the double-track cantilever pole will be 50% greater, taller, than the standard pole. You measure that by what is above the horizontal span, where the electrification is. Now, the poles that were featured in the photographs in the staff report are not 50% taller than the standard pole. They are 15% taller than the standard pole. So that's a big difference. Now, in summary, I do want to mention that the reason that it took me a long time to find any photographs, because as Mike mentioned, and other people have mentioned, there really are very, very few installations where double-track cantilevers are the norm. They are typically the exception. The 30-foot poles, nominal 30-foot poles, are used as the standard. And the double-track cantilever poles are typically used when you cannot literally put a foundation in, because there may be, for example, in South San Francisco, there are many adjacent freight tracks, and so you cannot put a second foundation in. You have to use a double-track cantilever pole. But I did find, this is in Denver, the same contractor, Caltrain's contractor, Balfour Beatty, just completed an installation in Denver. And most of that installation is the 30-foot poles, but there are sections where they use the double track cantilever. And what's critical here is you can see that the vertical span and the horizontal span are roughly equal. And the poles planned for Lloyden Park, which nobody mentioned, are 46 foot high, but the horizontal span is 45 feet. It's massive. And so these are actual photos. I'm not saying we don't know what the specific height of this is, but it does mimic very closely the diagram. So I leave that with you. I don't know if you have any questions,
No,
but that
thank
is
you.
really all that I have to say. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Narissa.
It may or may not be the last, but I'll be brief. My name is Frank Burke, and I wrote to the council last week. I live at 76 Bellow with my wife Mary. We're otherwise delighted residents of this town. We love this town. We've lived here since 2013, after living in some other great communities in Arizona and Washington. And this is a wonderful town. I would just ask everybody who's here, who is from our town, who is opposed to this 46-foot pole, to please raise their hand so that you know who's involved here today. Thank you. The one point I wanted to make was that the staff report, and again, the Caltrain people tonight mentioned that there would be a redesign cost. That is what is sometimes referred to, in my opinion, a red herring, because they went ahead and designed 45-foot poles without consulting you or anybody else, and if they have to redesign, that's on them. They shouldn't have designed 46-foot poles without talking to people. And I think one of the council members rightfully asked, do you use these 46-foot poles elsewhere in the system? And they answered yes. They have a lot of them in South San Francisco in industrial neighborhoods. So they already have a design for 46-foot poles. They already have a design for 30-foot poles. So it's hard for me to imagine that there's a redesign cost other than, it's probably all digitized, hitting erase on one screen and copying and pasting the 30-foot design in Atherton. That's all I have to add to the wonderful presentations that already made. Thank you for your time and effort.
Thank you, Frank. Please.
Joan Hondet at 32 Below and David Barca and Police at 23 Below. Yeah, we do exchange mail as well. I have a question for the Caltrain people. The double cantilever poles that are in the northern section of the run, what percentage of those are going to residential section versus, industrial? Because I used to take Caltrain to go to San Francisco to work, and most of that area always appeared to be more commercial.
Joan, I apologize, but just in a process purpose, they're not actually able to be engaged at this point. You can make a comment. I know. In that comment component, you could have got in there, but if you can probably talk to them afterwards. They're probably more than willing.
I think that's important to the whole.
Oh, no, absolutely. And, just in the spirit of Frank, thank you, Frank, for doing your hand pull, because that was going to be my job. Assisting is always good. Anybody that is in the opposition of the Lloyden Park group that would be in favor of the double cantilever component, would you please do the same honor in raising your hand? Seeing none. Thank you. Like to see where the balance is, but didn't know if there was a fly in the room. So, okay. Any other member of the public that, if it already hasn't been said, would like an opportunity to say something that's maybe been missed? Please.
With electrification, are we going to get back our Monday to Friday service in Atherton?
If we were allowed to answer questions, I would answer that, but I can tell you after this is over.
It's not on the agenda.
You can actually
Thank you.
You can briefly answer.
We don't have an anticipated period of time. It's going to be based on service. So, we've heard that it is coming back, but the likelihood?
Through the chair.
Please.
If you don't mind, as part of the project, it was part of the commitment to restore service to the Atherton station. Now the details of how many trains we put in on a daily basis That's something that we'll have to go through when we go through the service scheduling exercise, certainly with the new vehicles that we'll get, and the fact that we will be restoring service to Atherton and also Broadway for.
Thank you.
Eliminate services was the life of your present executive when she was on the Caltrans board.
I did not.
So I'm going to try to control the meeting. Don't make it any more difficult than it already is. I'm going to ask if there are any more public comments on this topic. Seeing none? Oh, seeing Greg. Merry Christmas.
You can strike me out of order if I'm not addressing the problem on the agenda, but, you know, I think that the audio effect of all of this could be mitigated tremendously by just putting in quad gates at Watkins. And, because that would be a quiet zone all the way from Encinal to Redwood City. And for $1.5 million on a $1.5 billion project, I mean, that's peanuts. And I would think Caltrans would be well advised to spend that little amount of money to eliminate all the noise factor from the horns by just merely putting in quad gates.
Thank you, Greg. All right. Any last comments? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the comments and bring it back to council. To my colleagues, and I'm going to start with Councilmember DeGolia.
Okay. Well, we first learned about this issue a month ago at the council meeting when the issue of approving the comprehensive agreement was on our consent calendar. And there was a report from council that introduced that, and I pulled it from the consent calendar just because I wanted to confirm that the design was to principally put the poles that would hold the electrical wires down the middle of the tracks as much as possible, which we had asked for to reduce the impact on trees, and to confirm that the height of the proposed poles, which in the staff report said 25 to 30 feet, was accurate. When that was pulled off and we had a discussion with the Caltrain representatives at that meeting a month ago, that was the first time we were informed that, in fact, the 65% design included a few poles that were at the 45.5-foot level, which was entirely new information to us. And in response to that, what we asked for was transparency. We asked Caltrain to inform us what the number of trees that would be impacted with the 30-foot poles for the section of town where we needed the poles down the side rather than in the middle, and how that compared to the number of trees that would be impacted with the higher poles. And I want to thank Caltrain for responding to that. I feel like Caltrain has thoroughly responded to that request. They provided us the information. I think that, I also believe that the reason that Caltrain chose to include in their design the 45-foot poles was in response in particular to Atherton's comments to the EIR, which was we were very concerned about the impact to the trees throughout Atherton, and at that point the projected impact was the removal of something like 200 trees. So it was a really significant proposed impact at that time. And I think that it was in good faith that Caltrain looked for a design that would minimize the impact on the trees. I think there was a mistake made that once you guys realized that you were moving down that path to reduce the impact on the trees with the higher poles, that you didn't talk to the staff, our staff about it, so that they could be informed, and that the first time it came out was in a council meeting. But, you know, look, this is government and things happen. And I think the most important issue is that Caltrain did respond to the request that the council made at that last meeting. I think that, it's really obvious to me, as a representative of this community, that the community has an opinion about it. The right, I think, approach at this point is for us to work with Caltrain to look to put in place the 30-some-odd, the standard poles, rather than the 45-foot poles, because the impact just isn't that great in terms of the benefit to saving trees. If we were saving, going to have to remove 10 oak trees because of putting poles on both sides of the track, then that would be a much tougher issue. But that's not the issue. We actually do have that issue for the next item on the agenda, but it's not that significant. But this is, so I just want to say, I think you've been responsive to us, and at this point, I would like to go forward with a collaborative effort where now that the information is out there, we can work together, because we need to work together. Both Atherton and Caltrain need each other. This is a relationship that exists. We can't eliminate the tracks, and they can't eliminate the town. We're working together. And we need, I really think it's important that we find a way to reset this relationship so we can work together and not work against each other. There's absolutely no reason to work against each other, and Caltrain has responded to us. I have no doubt where I come out on what the right answer for this issue is, but the bigger issue is how we go forward for me.
Councilman?
You know what I mean?
Please.
So, the thing that struck me most about the last meeting was the Caltrain representatives have been wonderful and very transparent in many ways, but they took the position that we really had no right to anything other than input, which they could take or not take in this process. And specifically, we talked about the change in the EIR are 46 feet, and it was just kind of, that's the way it is. I'm actually not as sanguine as Rick is about working with Caltrain. Not that you haven't been wonderful. We do appreciate the fact you're here and have came to the last meeting and with the been to a number of meetings. Much appreciate that. But I think we're still at the basic posture is we have a clear message to deliver, and I agree with Rick. It's obvious what our message is, and the response we've gotten from you is that you'll consider it. And it would be, before I got comfortable working, I'd love to know more than that, whether than just it's going to be considered, because over the course of a number of years, we've had a lot of things that have been considered, and not that many have been considered favorably. And so, but before we, I don't know how we can move forward, but I'd like to get the message as clearly as we possibly can. There is a position of the town, and I'm thankful, I appreciate the fact that you'll consider it. I'd like a little more than that, than the consideration. And perhaps that might be a report back to this council at our next meeting with the results of that consideration and an opportunity for more public comment at that time.
Councilwoman Lewis.
So, I totally agree with my colleagues, and I guess I don't understand Caltrain's position if they insist on doing the double cantilever. It doesn't make good sense to me why you would not want to work with a community like this. It's a net saying to Caltrain, because it means that the trains are going to, run. They're going to get electrified, right? Both systems electrify it. I don't think there's a huge cost difference between 5 versus 10. I think that, and the redesign, the cost of redesign, I'm crazy right now with architects telling me how much it's going to cost to redesign something that should have been designed appropriately in the very beginning, okay? with the consideration of everything, of everybody. So I do agree with Councilmember DeGoya that we really need to be partners in this. But the letter that we received last night seemed to me to indicate that, well, we're gonna go ahead and do this regardless of what you say. And for you to say you're gonna just maybe consider our input and go back to the powers that be, and then come back and say, well, we've decided that it's not feasible, we're not gonna, accommodate your community, that would be really disappointing. I mean, it would be really bad faith, I think, and not a happy situation. So I know you're not the decision maker, you're the messenger, but very nice guys, I'm sure. But like Councilmember Lambert said, we need some more reassurance that this community is going to be heard and Caltrain is going to do the right thing for us.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Sure. Thank you. First off, Caltrain, we do appreciate the fact that when this project first came up, there was a substantial number of trees that were going to be damaged, not only in the community, but also right here in the park. And y'all worked with us on that, and that's appreciated. But I think as you were then getting down to the completion, and you're not quite there yet, but even as you started to understand that there was just one tree, I think that I would have hoped that there had been some interactive conversations to say, hey, I know you want to save the trees, but this is a eucalyptus tree, and it's just one, and what do you guys think? So there should have been a little bit of collaboration, I would have hoped, and I would hope that having done designs and things like that, being 65% done, while I understand, is a lot further along than being zero, but I still think that there's room for redesign, and I'm not sure if that 65% actually is detailed here. I understand that there probably are fiber optic cables. I think you all authorized putting those in a number of years ago, so you do have to do some potholing and look in that, but you should also have plans for showing where those are. But I would hope that you could work with the community, a community that I think generates about half a million dollars in taxes that go to Caltrain today. I would hope that you would at least take our input and try and work with the community that's being, especially the neighborhood that's being directly impacted here, and take the input back seriously. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for coming, by the way.
So I am the town's representative, along with Rick, related to rail. And sometimes I think I have so much rail, I get sick of rail. And I'm pleased to see all these people in the room related to this topic. I don't think that there's going to be a different message up here that's going to conflict with what you believe, our relationship is. We're somewhere between, and we want to do better, we want to be better, but we expect you to be better as well. And I think that we're here to try to get over a hurdle that has a time constraint. And as I read the letter sent to me yesterday evening, I was disappointed. I get that you guys are under time constraints, and I know that the town has a history of standing their ground related to what they believe in, and I will say I believe that there's another point where we have a belief that it's in the best interest of this community to have the dual concept 10 poles that go down on each side of the track. And I think as far as safety is concerned, I think that's another consideration. And as far as the track component, the passing track component, I mean, we also know that that's coming into play. So if the reality is that there's still the utilization of a single track through Atherton with nearby passing tracks, you'll still be able to provide service to many people within this county if everything goes correctly. So that being said, I would like to hear and have you guys back in 1 month at our next meeting. I would like to ask staff to now engage, and with our belief as a council that the community would like to see the dual component and not a singular cantilever component, and come back in 30 days. We want you to be able to get enough time to make a decision, to do a revision, come back with some potential cost considerations that you guys say, if there is a cost consideration, that it's gonna cost us more. But we heard several people here talk about maybe the cost consideration will offset if you're not doing potential tree trimming or the additional foundation, maybe there's a cost. You don't even know what the cost of the boring component's gonna be yet, reality, because you haven't done the sampling to determine the depth. That'll impact your cost overall. So that being said, I think that you have a clear, idea of where we're coming from. I do want to continue to work better. I think our relationship as a town has gotten better. I think that the broad-sided nature of the way that this has popped up, in the sense that it was news to us, we want to get in front of it and work with you and, not cause you any potential delays. So let's see if we can go ahead and do that. City Manager, please.
Just 2 comments, if I could.
Yeah.
Questions actually to Caltrain. One is, what's beyond the town of Atherton boundaries? If you've got the 45.5-foot 5 poles, are they continuing beyond?
No, I don't remember off the top of my head at this point. I can check when we get back.
So they might be transitioning
They
back.
transition.
But if it transitions, there might be additional cost involved with that transition back to the standard pole.
And potentially, that's why we want to do kind of a thorough analysis on
Right.
cost to see what the impacts would be if we do make a change.
And then the second question is, the letter that the council received alluded to the fact that there might be additional aesthetic issues that the council might be able to provide feedback on with respect to the poles beyond the pole height. What specifically are some of those?
I think that would be referring to the fact that it's a bit wider, as we discussed.
The horizontal.
And you've got the horizontal component, which is more.
No.
They alluded to color of poles,
Oh, color, okay.
Oh,
things
right,
like
right.
that.
Yeah, so the other consideration would be the color of the pole is one of them. The other one would be the shape of the shape of the pole design.
Square versus
Square
versus round.
Square, tubular, that's the kind of choices we've got out there. I think color of the poles, there were some commitments made about how they have to fit within their regulation.
Within the station area, there was a consideration of color for the poles to match the station aesthetics.
Okay.
Not to be.
It's a separate mitigation.
Can we get a little color chart to kind of choose from,
Well, I think it would be important for them to come back with
I
that
think that would be
information in
really
January.
So in fact, you actually do.
It's
So
good,
we'll just say
yeah.
what we've
Modern
been
or
doing for other
traditional.
cities.
See-through or not.
We've been bringing a palette of some choices. It's typically 3 choices recommended by a landscape architect who's trying to match the surrounding conditions of the existing station. And we do give the cities and the towns the choice of which one they want to go with as far as the pole of the station is concerned.
Is that just within the station boundaries
It's
or
within the
beyond?
station boundaries, and then one pole beyond the station itself is where the color choice is.
So realistic, we're talking about,
We're still talking the center line poles.
right, and for you guys, at 1 pole. So, we've had obviously experience related to cell tower components, so we're not talking about you disguising something as a eucalyptus tree, right?
Or an oak.
Or an oak, maybe?
I'm sorry, Rick.
Please, I see 2 books, please.
Well, I just want to say, I think that'd be great to come back with those suggestions. Whatever we can collaborate on with you, I think that it will really help the relationship and move this forward, and we're prepared to do that quickly. I mean, we understand there's some time pressure from your side, and we want to work with you on that. And we'd like you to work with us on this pole design issue.
Please.
I was going to the same place, which was really more to see if we could just get an answer. Will you commit to being back here next month at our council meeting?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's something we commit to doing. If we want to go back and take a look at it, I think do some cost analysis, like we said earlier. If we can get, I think we understand what your position is. I think I've heard loud and clear from not only the council but from the residents. Certainly, we would like you guys to give us, as an official response, this is the position that you would like to take, and then we will take that and run it with the thorough analysis of cost, other schedule impacts that may come as a result of the change, and bring it back for discussion.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, the official response, what do we need?
We don't,
Well, we don't have,
it's just direction.
hello? I'm here. Come on, you guys. I'm working with you.
We're
Bill?
talking
So,
EIR stuff.
this is actually a legal question. We actually don't have an actionable item set on the agenda. So we're
I've got
really.
direction
It's
to,
direction.
But we do have direction. I think that you hear it from 5 members that our direction is, and there is obviously a caveat. We'd like further information as far as camouflaging, eucalyptus trees, whatever you guys have. And that we'd like to really bring back. If you get that information to staff as soon as possible, we get prepared. So when you're here next time, and many of these people probably will be in attendance or representatives thereof, so we can finalize it, but that's our direction at this
yeah, I
point.
can encapsulate that in a letter from the mayor's signature to go back, just so they have clear feedback.
Good. I apologize that the rail committee, you guys have been at the attendance of the rail committee, and I would assume that they would also be equally interested in having your attendance, and Paul Jones, or
Yeah, the next rail committee.
We don't have a
is
committee.
February.
February, so it won't be
2nd.
till February, so we'll actually be here before February.
We could have a special meeting if you wanted us.
Oh, yeah, you guys always call special meetings. Let's deal with that later, but we know where we're going with that. I thank you guys and have a happy holiday, and for everybody that's here to see this item or hear this item, you have our permission to exit stage. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Absolutely.
You want a copy of David's comments too?
Yes, please, I'm gonna
Give them all to this young lady here.
If you hand them, Teresa will take them and make them part of the
Thank you. Excuse me?
Make them part of the record.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to us and considering
Oh, we
us.
enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Didn't we?
So we're on track for the 7 o'clock party?
Yeah, exactly.
It's your first meeting, dude, and we are already there.
You know what? Mike was running the show.
But you know we're gonna.
And they'd be 35-foot or 30-foot poles in place already.
Well, if it's up to me, we wouldn't even have to hear this stuff. It would be done. Yeah, I agree. Especially, yes. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead in the interest of time, as long as I can get staff and everybody. Thank you, guys. So we're going to. Where's all the police officers? Security.
Yeah, Mr. Jansen moved.
Yeah, where's our muscle in this operation?
Yeah, tell Sharon she's over there drinking.
Thank you. There's cocktails outside. It usually moves people.
There is.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move to item number 19, the Civic Center project, provide direction on the impact of heritage trees, and if appropriate, direct the city attorney to prepare and the city manager to execute the amendment to the consulting services agreement with WRNS Studios for design options. And Mike and Marty are on point. And George.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll do a brief opening statement on this particular item before I turn it over to Marty and Pauline Souza, who are here this evening, to answer any questions. But I'll preface that by, of the 13 remaining trees on the project site under the Planning Commission removal approval, 10 remain in question. Trees number 76, which is located on the roadway between the main building and one of the adjacent neighbors near Fair Oaks, has been adjusted by the architect for save. Tree number 89, which is next to the neighbor to the police department, has been adjusted for saving. And tree number 92 has also been adjusted. Tree number 92 is up near the SFPUC water line and the police department secure entry. Those three have already been accommodated within the project by the architect, so they're no longer an issue for consideration for removal by the council. In short, that leaves 10 trees remaining. Staff's recommendation at this point, after having some conversations with the design team and the architect and looking through these things, is that tree number 63, which is inside the courtyard proper, tree number 66, which is on the curve of the courtyard entry area, trees number 102 and 101, which are conjoined trees either in a pathway or at the head of an ADA parking space near the library entry, and tree number 115, which is at the back end of a parking space, should be considered protected in place during the project, and a solution and redesign be found via a change order process as the project moves along, because we can accommodate it probably via some smaller landscaping or hardscape changes down the line. Tree number 55, a decision needs to be made this evening for some direction for staff to transplant or an affirmative direction to the architect to redesign the area of this particular tree. Trees number 67, which is in the center of the secure parking lot entry driveway. Tree number 78, which is near the base of the footing of the main building. And trees number 119 and 120 are in the middle of the roadway as it curves near the library near Maple. Staff believes cannot be saved without significant redesign and possible project delay. So that's the entry. So that means, from staff's perspective, 4 trees are still recommended for removal from that original 18 list, where we had 5 for condition. Now we have 4 for project impact removal. The others are recommended to save. So with that, I'll turn it over to Marty and WRNS, Pauline Souza, who may have some additional comments or answers Q&A for the council.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, we don't have anything else to add at this point. We're ready to answer any questions you might have. Pauline's right here, Souza, and her and I have discussed this at length, and as the city manager mentioned, tree number 63, 66, 101, 102, and 115, we believe we can deal with those trees during the construction with the general contractor and making some minor design changes at that time, and council doesn't need to deal with that at this point. So, but the other trees, again, as the city manager, 55, we're looking for direction for you on that one.
Okay, any questions from council? Rick?
I'll let Elizabeth go first.
I don't have any questions, like a clarifying question. At this point, I have comments.
Okay, thank you.
So then I'll ask the question. So the redesign costs that were, I understand they're very preliminary and sort of estimates, but for the trees that you've just identified that we don't need to deal with, I would like to be able to assume that there aren't redesign costs.
Well, that's what I was assuming.
There'll be minor things during the project as a change order.
Well, I
but we don't know
understand
what
there
those
might
are.
be some change order because you may need to,
Right.
you know, based on where a tree is relative to a parking space, you may need to move it, but the assessment based on the survey that you have, and we'll see how exactly accurate that is, but is that we can work with those trees.
Correct.
Correct.
And in particular, I just want to confirm because there was a preliminary redesign cost associated with tree 63. That is the tree in the courtyard.
Yes.
Which the courtyard is not part of the project any longer.
The exterior of the courtyard is for landscaping, and I believe the current design shows, and Pauline, if you were here, shows a gate access into the courtyard near that tree. That might need to be adjusted or changed or modified in
So
some
to
way.
move the gate, but I
Right.
can't imagine it's $35,000
Right.
to move a gate.
Right.
Well, the estimate is from 38 to 74 for 63.
But again, those are architectural WRNS designs, and the different approach is that we're doing this down the line with a contractor on
Okay.
board, so.
That's what I was assuming, and that's why I didn't have the question, but since you raised the question, I just want to make absolutely clear that these design estimates for those trees,
Our estimates,
no.
our ranges.
No, are not even going to be assessed to us at all.
Correct.
Well, there will be some design costs
By
down
the
the line.
architect.
Down the line,
But we don't know what those are exactly, and the project may be adjusted as we go.
correct. Mike?
Go ahead, no, keep
Wait a
going.
minute.
We'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Approach. Mike, you want to concede to Elizabeth?
Of course.
No, go ahead.
Well, I actually have to say, so I do have clarifying questions. I guess for me, clarifying questions, I don't understand what is meant by the term redesign costs and what subsequent costs might attach and whether there's any rule of thumb at all we could, because this is sort of a partial price we're looking at, right? Or, okay, could someone answer that question?
Pauline.
Yeah.
Sure.
Pauline.
So let me try to explain in general how we approached it. Some of the items could affect parking, and we had spent a fair amount of time talking about parking. So that assumes a certain amount of meetings with either a stakeholder group or the stakeholder group we've worked with before, and council. And so there's an assumption with a process that's built into that amount. If it was a clear decision to just remove parking and create some space for the tree to remain, that's a very simple effort. However, if it's an effort that we're used to experiencing, which is much more collaborative and informative, and it requires more meetings, that is more time spent. So that's why the range is the range. If it is a simple pull back and again, increase the landscape, decrease the hardscape, it includes other disciplines that are not just WRNS, so civil, landscape, it could be electrical. So we were just providing, albeit very big ranges, because we hadn't had the chance to sit down and talk about how do we reduce the amount of, or how do we define the process?
So staff's intent is to say, we're saving that tree. We'll figure out how to save that tree as we go along. So it doesn't involve meetings with the CCAC, city council meetings, et cetera. We're saving the tree.
Okay, that doesn't answer the larger question I had, which is, that's the redesign aspect. Is there any rule of thumb we could apply? If we're trying to make what amounts to a cost-benefit decision, we actually don't have the costs. We have a fraction of the costs. So if there's a more expensive redesign cost, should we assume there's a more expensive all-in cost by the time we're done? Implementing the design, yeah.
It's a little hard because some trees, I think George mentions, are a little simpler to imagine, and some trees are more complex. So if the trees that are in the, like 115 is right in the center of 115 right at the exit of the parking by the police station. That's a little bit more complex because it then changes generators and buildings that support the police station and percentage of parking, and it's a little bit more work. There's grading there. It's right over the water line, so we have to kind of work through that. That's a complex process. Moving out again certain landscape to take the space and eliminating parking is, I'm sorry to repeat myself, is a less complex process. Okay. So to answer your question, I suppose I would take the high range if you're looking at the decision before you. I believe the suggestion is to see if there's work that can be done through construction, because some of this is assuming that if you interrupt the drip line, you affect the tree. And so a lot of this works through that consideration. If we are protecting the tree in place, and we understand the accuracy of the survey, we may be able to make a better decision in place. Does that make sense?
Okay. Mike?
I think we need to.
Any more comments? Questions?
I have comments, but I think that's my question.
Question?
I mean, I think we need to be a little bit more organized about our approach on these things. You rattled off the 4 trees that staff feels that they can do what I call a field expediency under construction without having the architects go back and do a redesign right now at
Correct.
a huge cost of between $38,000 to $74,000 or $50,000 to $100,000, which I think is is unnecessary in a lot of these, because in construction, now I think what Mike was asking was, can we define or quantify how much more cost it would be during the construction to make those field expediencies, right? Those field changes. Is that what you're kind of getting
In part,
to?
and also just...
But take the design cost away, because they're not going to redesign this.
They're not redesigning
I understand
it for
that.
biddable site plans, but they would do a field RFI inquiry that the contractor would use to make adjustments to the sites.
Okay, then we need to kind of have an understanding about how much that bill would come, because if it's going to be, my personal opinion is that There should be no redesigning at this point because they should have been designed correctly in the beginning to save all these trees. And I'm sorry about that. Anyway,
Question?
excuse me.
Question?
That was my opinion.
Okay. Bill, question?
No, well, I did have a question on the cost and the ramp associated with number 55. Especially when we have a ramp that's already out there in front of for handicap, in front of the existing city hall. It could go onto a porch and people could essentially get into the library using that. And so it would seem to me that 55, it just seemed like that was a very large expense for 55. The rest of them, I agree with, the assessment that George has made. I'd like to move forward with that, but I think that 55, he had it as questionable, and for me, it looked like it's something that we could fairly easily save.
Okay. Pauline, I do have a question on 55. Was there any consideration with that porch component, the impacts to that tree? So the porch component that is in the western side of that tree, is there any consideration related to what the impacts would be to the root structure or anything like that? Or was it just designed with the anticipation?
Well, no, they designed to take it down.
Yeah,
They designed to take it down.
that's fine.
So they're.
55 is the one on the library.
Right,
Yeah,
porch, right.
yeah. I mean, was the design considered with the removal, or was the design considered with saving the foundation to that tree?
The design was considered with.
Transplant.
With assuming there would be an impact to the tree because it's right at the drip line. And considering the other trees around it to save. So.
There's a visual in front of the library that might be.
Yeah, I think because you were asking for.
Yeah. Where the two people are sitting.
So it's a beautiful site, and working programmed through the site, what we did try to save as many trees as we could, and there was a lot of talk with the CCAC about where to move certain program in order to do that, and what was the consequence of some of these. The thought was we would save some primary trees, and hopefully those would help with the memory of the space. That particular tree is a difficult one because there are utilities that run right up against it, the water line, and some of the other heritage trees, and against the redwood tree. So we were pretty locked in at that point. Again, keeping the floor, the finished floor of the town hall and ramping up to that so that it blended well together was another part of that consideration. So it's a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. So I would agree that it seems for a tree of that size, if there was a consideration to move it, that might be the best solution.
Thank you, Pauline. Anybody else have any questions for Pauline or staff? Seeing no questions, I'm going to go ahead and open this up for comments from the public. Members of the public, any comments related to Malcolm, please?
Well, when I came here, it was about the rail issue, and I wasn't aware of this at all. But what I would say, when we talk about removing heritage trees, I think that's a very serious issue for this town. That ordinance, we put that together in response to the removal of 3 200-year-old oaks on Fair Oaks. It was a very large home there, Southern colonial style. And there were some neighbor disputes and some anger and painting psychedelic colors on fences to get response. But then that property was sold. A developer came in and divided into 3 acres and built 3 separate structures. When they were removing these old oaks, the council finally, we had a hard time getting 5 votes, or 3 votes we needed. When that happened, then the council responded, and adopted the heritage tree ordinance. And as we know, any rules that we have, when you make exceptions, that's precedent setting. We've all been through it. We've had homes that want to encroach 2 inches into the side yard setback, and the next time, if you grant that, it's going to be more. And so it's a serious thing. For this town, I mean, the little buttons that you wear have the symbol of the town is our oak tree. Trees are very, very important to our environment. And that was the reason the town adopted that ordinance. And once you make exceptions, then there's no really way that fairly you can ignore other people and wanting to take other exceptions. I think when you know when you're going out to build something, you know what the obstacles are. And so you have to design around them. I don't know if this is the town project or some other individual one, but I think that's a very important issue. And I think that there can be costs, but the costs to me are much greater when you break the rules. If we don't respect that ordinance, which to me is one of the most important for this town, to preserve the character of the town, that is a real problem. And if you accept it here, you're going to, if you're going to make an exception and remove a heritage tree, it's pretty hard to ignore anybody else coming in and wanting to remove trees because of their design. And so that would be my concern. I think that's a very important issue for this town. And to make exceptions, it does set a precedent.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Please.
Yeah, Betsy Colby, 45 London. And I thank you for your time on this. I know it has gotten stirred up a lot over the past few months. And part of that is because I think it's just in the past few months that we've had really accurate drawings showing where the new buildings are and where the trees are. So we finally are able to really judge what's going on. I guess I'm a little surprised that they're willing to save tree 66 for free, or whatever, and not save tree 67, which, as you guys know, is my favorite. So these numbers look really suspicious to me, and I hope you will go back and really try to pin them down on what these numbers are. Anyway, I'm still holding out hope for 67, just so you know. As far as 55, I would like to hear from Sally whether that could be transplanted. My guess is it probably couldn't be. And I'm hoping that they could consider putting a well or something in to accommodate it with that ramp. I'm afraid that we would spend the money to try to transplant it and it wouldn't survive and it would be fruitless. And finally, I want to thank Rick that he's spent a lot of time in this. I really appreciate him being very responsive, and I hope I can thank all of you too when this is all done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this?
Good evening, Denise Kupperman, 74 Atherton Avenue. And I want to thank you for your service to the town, and I want to thank you for taking very careful consideration of this issue. And I'd also really like to thank Rick for the amount of time that he has spent addressing this. And I truly understand that no design process doesn't get messy and have its difficulty and constraints, and certainly there are constraints on this site. My comments are that the estimates for the redesign on these trees, and after hearing that perhaps it requires additional meetings and community work, that might explain why these design fees are so high, because they do represent a significant percentage of the overall design fee, and I would encourage you, before you make a decision on all of these trees, which is important, and I know that time seems to be of the essence of the project, but please do not slot a tree for removal because we don't have all the information. We also don't have the information of what the economic value of these trees are. So you can't have any sort of offset. Each of these trees does have an economic value, and I would encourage you to be able to get that information, which hopefully you can have by your next council meeting, to be able to make that assessment. Aside from that, even if you were to take these high costs and you were to redesign around all these trees listed, it represents a very, very small percentage of the total cost of this project. It's about 1%. And so for 1%, I think that we could easily save all of these trees, and I would encourage you perhaps to do so, especially in light of the rail. Most of these trails are along the corridor between the Civic Center project and the library. And what better mitigating factor than to have all these trees, many of which are over 20 feet tall, to mitigate the rail and the corporation yard. So I encourage you to, if you feel that you don't have all the information, to maybe postpone until January, at which point we could provide you with the economic value of these trees, or to maybe decide to save all of them. Lastly, with regard to the trees, and I do think 66 and 67 should be saved together. They have grown together. They make a beautiful unit, as well as tree number 55, which would be in a well, is adjacent to a large tree that was slotted to be saved as part of the project. But together, it provides this beautiful, complete canopy. It's quite special. I'll just close by thanking you, and there was one other point. Oh, yes. While trees number 63, 101, 102, 119, and 120 could be dealt with during the construction phase, I really think that construction documents in terms of the type of construction and how things are going to be constructed around those trees would be required. And that might cost you a little upfront money, but would certainly make sure that the trees would survive the construction. Thank you so much. And
Thank
happy
you.
holidays.
Ditto. Any other public comments? Please.
I'm Nancy Grove, 102 Britain, and I hope to pull on your heartstrings a little bit tonight. I'd like to pass out a picture. I think we get hung up in tree number 67 and tree number 55 and tree number 102, and I went down and took a picture of, this is Betsy's tree, this is tree number 67. Phenomenal specimen. You can see 66 over in the corner, and you can see the canopy they create together. When you look at this tree, you can tell it's really old. It's older than anybody in this room. It's older than anybody thought about a police department, secured parking access. But it's in incredible health. It's got no trunk lesions, no branch lesions. It's just a beautiful tree, so it'll be around for our grandchildren, our children, and future Atherton residents if we let it be. It offers shade. It gives back moisture to the air. It sequesters carbon. It harbors birds and squirrels. You can see a couple of squirrel nests up in there as you look at it. And its only fault was that it sat for generations, I'm going to choke up, in a place that now we want to put access to a secured parking. It sort of didn't ask for that. I think that I really don't want to slow this project down. I know that everybody involved with it has been through a lot. But I also hope that you won't let the efficient be the enemy of the good, and that you save this tree. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment, bring it back to council. Councilmember DeGolia, would you like to start?
Okay. So the first thing that I want to say, and I think there has been a misimpression that I'd really like to clarify. There are absolutely no rules that have been broken around evaluating the trees on this parcel. The heritage tree ordinance that we have in Atherton requires when a heritage tree is subject to removal, even if it's in the footprint for a design, it has to go to the Planning Commission. This plot had 85 heritage trees on it. And the plans that the architects prepared called for the removal of 18 and saving 67. Those 18 trees went to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission evaluated them and voted to remove all 18 of them. That is the process that we have. That is the process that any homeowner has to go through who has a heritage tree that should be removed. And that's a process that this council feels very seriously about and insists that that be applied, and in fact we're looking at even strengthening that ordinance. So I think it's extremely important that it be communicated to the other members of our community that we're not cutting any corners on this parcel. We are trying to adhere not just to the letter of the requirements, but we're trying to go beyond it. And I mean, a few people have thanked me for the work I've done. I've really spent a lot of time on these trees. I know every single individual tree. I've been to every single one of them 3 or 4 times to look at them. And you don't just go to them and look at the tree. You gotta find a mark on the tree that identifies what its number is, and these marks aren't easy to find. So it takes work and time to do that. And other members of the council have done exactly the same thing. And we have done it together. We've sat and we've looked at every single one of these trees and tried to evaluate how we could save them. There were 18 trees that the Planning Commission approved to remove. Of those 18 trees, we have now, as staff has agreed that we can save 8 of them. 5 of the trees are scheduled for removal because of poor health. And that leaves 5 trees. And all 5 of those trees are in a position where to change the design would be very costly. They're either in the middle of the road, they're at the foundation of the main building, or there's one tree that is next to the entry to the library. And staff has recommended that we move forward with saving 8 of those 18, and 5 of them are being removed for health, and 4 of them they're recommending to remove rather than to redesign the project around. And that leaves 1 tree, which is tree 55. And tree 55, if you look at, maybe George could hold up the image. If you look at this image of the library, tree 55 is where the people are sitting on the entry to the library. Maybe.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Right about here.
Yeah.
They're on, but it's in the ramp.
Yeah, it's on the ramp.
It's
That's
in
on,
the
they're
ramp.
sitting on the ramp. They're sitting on the rail to the ramp.
In your ramp on the way in.
And I think there's 2 possibilities that we could look at to save tree 55. The architects recommend transplanting it. And it, look, I'm not an arborist, I don't know this stuff, but I go look at that tree. That is a spectacular tree. It is a big tree. It's gonna be really expensive to transplant it, and I think it's really important that if we're gonna spend that kind of money, that we hear from the arborist community that in fact we have a good likelihood of success of transplanting it, because the last thing we want to do is remove that tree and then have it die. And I think it's planned to be moved into the center courtyard, isn't it? And I think that was the proposal.
That's a bid option.
Yeah, for it to be moved. So it would become a center tree in what is now Ashfield, and will be that central point between the library and the administration building, which is a courtyard that can be used for various activities. The other option is to well it, which, it's at about, I don't know, a 3 to 3.5 foot point on this ramp. That's a deep well. We really need to look at, with that building being as close as those people are, how much pruning would have to happen for that tree to be able to survive. I've got a house that was built with 2 live oaks from me to George, of where their trunk is and where the foundation is. You couldn't do that today, but that was done 18 years ago. And those trees are okay right now, but they had a hard time over this time. So I think we need arborist input on which of those options is the best. I'd love to save that tree, and I feel sick that both 67 and 78. 78 is also a spectacular tree.
Yeah.
It's a tree out near Fair Oaks, but it's right in the foundation of the main building. It's too expensive to change it. So I just wanted to be really clear that we've really followed the process. I think the staff has worked really hard on this issue. I mean, I have driven George hard, probably driven him crazy on this issue. But we have walked this parcel twice. We have looked at these things every single way we could, and we're saving 8 of the 18. I feel proud of that.
Councilwoman Lewis.
So I have been in several of these meetings with Rick and George and looking at these trees, and it just is, and initially I said, you can, during the construction phase, you can work around some of these trees, and if this road from Maple, the redesign of the road coming through had taken into consideration saving all these trees, it could easily have done that in the design stage. And I said, why is it? Well, because it follows the curve of the library building, and it looks very beautiful. I mean, architecturally, it really is a beautiful way to design the new road. But unfortunately, it just didn't take into consideration 120, 119, 115 very, very much. And so I said we could just push the road over, or just design around these trees. And parking is an issue. Parking is a real issue. We need to maybe add some more parking along Fair Oaks in the front area, where I think you can, if we look at that a little harder. But, and I remember the discussion with number 55 at the CCAC. And, they said, well, we're just going to do the ramp straight up because we're not going to bring it on a swoop because of the water line that's under there. And they said, well, we can just move it. And it was just kind of an offhand thing. And I'm thinking, this is going to be problematic. So I think that the well is probably the best idea, and there would still be enough room for access for people coming into the library, including that well. And I think it could be made with a little bench seat around it or whatever, and it could be a lovely architectural. So I think we really need to look at saving number 55. We looked at the redesign of the secured parking area, and this has, I love the police, and I know the police need a lot of space for their parking and for their ancillary building and all their other bells and whistles that they need in that secured area. But oh my goodness, I honestly did not know, it was not brought to my attention on the CCAC that these 2 trees would have to go in order to accommodate this. It's insane I think, to design something when you know that we love our trees so much, and to have this parking area designed such that we're going to take these 2 trees down, I'm sorry. I don't get it, because from the CCAC committee, from the very beginning, we said, we want to save as many trees as possible. That was our mantra. And then I trusted the professionals to really do it, except I know that I was in that one discussion about 55 and the ramp going up, and they said, well, we can just move it. Okay. So I really would love to see any way, shape, or form to save both 67 and 66 with the ingress, egress, redesign of that secure parking area. I just think that we should be able to do it. And number 78, again, trying to fit the building in that small area and not over the water line, it just it was not, I think it was that, well, we're gonna lose a tree. It just wasn't brought to the awareness that if we could have designed around that tree a little bit. We really could have. I think it's a lost cause right now, so let's, make a pact that we're gonna plant, another significant tree nearby that will grow and be there for our future generations. But I'm happy that staff, and this is news to me, that staff has come up with the idea that they can do a field expediency and save some of these, because these redesign costs, they're crazy money, and I just don't want to accept it. I don't think that we should pay for any redesign costs, because I think they should have been designed correctly in the beginning.
Councilmember Limprist?
Sure. Lots of conversation, right? There's clearly been a breakdown in the process somewhere, somehow. And I'm actually a little bit concerned. I'm happy that staff comes back and says, we could save this number of trees now, but it concerns me that just took a little bit of yelling and all of a sudden there's no cost and we could save these trees. And that makes me actually uncomfortable.
There is a cost.
Okay.
There'll be a change order cost down the line.
Okay, which will be?
Don't know, we're not a contractor on board yet.
But it's not the redesign cost, it's not the architect
No,
redesign.
I understand. So you're expecting that cost to be minimized. My point is, we've been through this process. At the last minute, there's a push, or there's some shouting, and all of a sudden it's, well, you don't really have to make hard choices. We could have done this in the first place. And that's...
It's not exactly, I wouldn't characterize it like that.
Okay, so what is different now from the last meeting we had?
These are still hard choices.
With regard to the choices, the staff recommendations to the trees they're going to save.
There
Okay.
are hard choices. Some of the pathways have to be redesigned, some of the parking needs to be redesigned, but we're going to change it from a decision that the council's making to save the tree and pay those costs down the line. Because you're going to have to pay for tree protection costs along the way, you have to pay for a change order on RFI from the architect to provide that redesign on site. The decision that the council's making is save that tree.
So could
Please.
Could I just interrupt? But those down the road change order fees, I believe, will be less than the cost of, number one, taking down these big trees.
Right.
Because I think the fee to take down these big trees is $5,000 to $10,000. I mean, so I think doing, did you say more?
Yeah, 78, 76, they're gonna cost more than $10,000 to take down. They're big trees. They're big.
You mean 67?
67 and 78.
Yeah, 78, yeah, I'm sick about 78, but I don't see a way around that. But, and if we don't have to, I'm not gonna authorize WRNS to start doing redesigning at these fees at this point. I'm just not gonna do that.
Back to Mike.
Yeah, so my other concern is timing. We've mentioned it several times. We haven't really teed it up. What would be the consequence on the schedule for the project if we were to redesign some of these, around some of these trees? Would there be a consequence?
You mean the ones that we're not recommending the field
Correct.
expediency? Yeah, there would be a design impact.
It's in the staff report, I don't know if you want to address it too, how much, depending on what tree and all that, right?
Depends on the tree, and it depends on, so say 67, it's a critical tree. We would need to work with the police department, figure out what to do, and move the ancillary building. You'd have to lose parking. So there's a little bit, there's more time there to work that through the drawings, and since we are in permitting, it affects a number of different disciplines. So the cost is really a reflection of the number of disciplines that have to change their backgrounds and have it organized to go back through permitting. It's a different process because we're so far down the line.
That's only for 67.
But you were, so scheduling. I guess
Scheduling.
If you ask it, it depends on the trees we're talking about. I would say the
So
ones.
can I just insert?
Please.
I think there's three possibilities here. There's 4 trees that are being recommended to be removed, and there's 3 possibilities. One is redesigning the building to allow 78, right? That's the tree in the foundation underneath George's office. Another is redesign the access to the secured parking and moving the ancillary building, that's 67. Those are 2 different types of design costs, one very substantial, one substantial. And then the third design change is for trees 119 and 120, which are in the roadway off of what is now Reading Park. And they're frankly in the roadway, not because the architects designed the road to beautifully work with the building, but because the CCAC decided to change the roadway from a 90-degree angle at Maple and Station Lane to be a 45-degree angle so that it would be safer. So we don't have that stop sign at Maple and Station Lane. And I think what wasn't really considered when that decision was made was that in fact, when you angle it at the 45 degrees, you go through what is a bunch of trees. And 2 of those trees, that would be a design change, which Elizabeth referred to, moving that road a little bit toward Reading Park. And my guess is that's a less substantial design change than either of the other 2. But it's still a design change.
It does, and it does shift the parking spaces into the retention basin that's next to the,
Which we redesigned.
which would also then need to be redesigned.
And 78 really is linked, if I may, to the road that we're needing to connect. So even if you move the building around and redesign the building, that road is running right underneath the drip line. So it breaks our heart. You know, it probably doesn't seem like it, but it was very, very difficult. I mean, if you think about the number of green trees that remain, the heritage trees that remain, and the number of red spots that are there, it's still painful. But, you know.
Back to my.
Could we also, tree 115, can you explain what the plan is with that, and what impact that has? Because I know before you were extremely reluctant to take away parking spaces, and this seems like it would eliminate a parking space or 2.
I am still extremely
So
reluctant to take away a parking space.
But the staff recommendation is that that happens.
The staff recommendation is that there's a potential to maybe add a parking space to the right of the existing parking space, which takes out that pedestrian pathway that goes into the courtyard that needs to be moved anyway because it's connected to tree 63. Maybe we can add a space there and add to what Denise Kupperman talked about at a prior meeting, maybe a green space parking area or a compact space parking area as a head into that tree in some way, or just to add a tree box around it.
Yeah.
Okay. Bill?
So it means moving the parking a little bit to the right. There is some open space.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But it's just, I know that's a change, just to make sure I understand why we're doing that. And then with regard to tree 55, it sounds like there's more information that we could get. What would be the impact of seeking more information, if you're like, whether it be, people talk about welling it or, you know, some different options. What would be the impact of delaying this 55, a decision on 55 for a little while? Is there an 80-20 solution kind of similar to what you referred to the others with regard to tree 55?
And whether or not tree 55 is on the critical path to the planning process, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that we'd want confirmation that if we were going to work around it, that an arborist would let us know that would allow it to live a healthy life.
Yeah.
Because right below the drip line would be the ramp and the deck. And we could cut the deck back as much as we think we need to. It's just, again, we are working in its perimeter, in the drip line perimeter.
Just looking for a time frame.
So within the next month, we could provide that sort of analysis.
And that would have no significant impact on the rest of the project?
It should. Right now, it's listed as transplant, so we're moving it presently, so it would just be a change from that. But it would also impact the design of the deck and the pathway and all that sort of stuff, which would be on hold until we made that decision.
Okay, and final, last question, I apologize, I know, you've probably already gone over a lot of this. I'm still a little confused about trees 119 and 120. and whether there is a solution to saving those trees. It's not a terribly expensive solution.
It involves moving the roadway.
But is that, I think Rick described that as kind of, I forget your exact words, but not that big a deal. I mean,
Well, it's not as big as
not as big as
78
78.
or
Understood.
67.
That's why I'm actually, that's
It's
why
a
I'm
big
focused
deal.
on that one.
I think it could be done. I really do.
Is there, let me just ask, is there a process where we could, again, kick the can down the road a little bit and have to get more information without delaying the
That was
project?
much more significant.
That would delay the project.
Yes.
I'd love to find an 80-20 solution to that, because it feels to me like that's something we could accomplish. But I don't have a specific solution for it, so I'd actually would look to my council members for suggestions on that.
Thank you, Mike. Councilman Whitmer?
So, first off, as I look at tree 66, and I know that, you know, your comments, George, were that we think we can work around that. But looking at the design, it's almost like right on top of the water line. So, you know, I have to question as to whether or not that's the capability.
That's a future
but-
water line, council member, in case they ever consider that down the road. We're saying right now they have no option or no consideration of doing that.
That's their easement, basically.
Okay.
That's
All
easement.
right. Okay, so that answers that question. I'm in favor of doing the welling on 55. You know, I think that transplanting a tree of that size could actually damage it. So I think that doing a welling there would be something that would be appropriate. You know, like Mike, you know, I would have liked, when we were looking at these designs, that the CCAC would have had in part of the package that staff worked with them on that come forward, would have shown the trees that were being taken out at that time, and that didn't happen. You know, and now we're faced, you know, we're being not pushed, but we've got a delay and we've got additional costs where we actually don't even have the money to build the building, you know. You know, it's more expensive than we would have liked to have vis-a-vis the money that we raised for it. And you know, and of course, we've already understood that as we design the cost, it's a substantial amount of money every month that we delay. So, you know, I'm kind of in a quandary as to say what do we really want to do. My thoughts are, first off, I think staff did a good job of evaluating these that they thought that they could do something with, and were, I won't say were no-brainers, but they felt pretty confident that we could save some money and not incur, hopefully, tremendous expense. And so thank you, staff, for coming through with that at a very short period of time. You know, of the ones and the rest of your recommendations, you know, if there was a way to do something with 67, I mean, fine, but the way I see it, it's in the middle of a road, an entranceway, and I just think that that's based on the cost that I saw in there, it's substantial. I don't know if that's something that we can do or not. If it doesn't impact anything, you can come back with a better feeling. I'd like to know that. And as I said, I'm more interested in, you know, just welling 55. I think that's the best solution for that, and you know, and just moving forward with that, as opposed to doing a bunch of trades and meeting with the CCAC and things like that, which does end up costing money. So that's my 2 cents on those.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, so it sounds like the information related to 55, we're pretty consistent on as far as the council, that if we can take another 30 days, get a arborist opinion, and potentially get some consideration of what the design of well impact would be, I think that's kind of the direction related to 55. The other, it doesn't make, we don't have to really discuss to any degree the trees that are being saved, because it looks like there'd be some considerations in the design component that maybe we'd have to deal with downstream. But at this point, we still don't know what those impacts would be. But we do have a target number of trees, number 78, number 67, number 119, and 120 are all in direct impact of the project. So we're down to roughly 4 trees, and correct me if I'm wrong, 4 trees that are going to take a significant design change to change the foundation related to the administration town hall building was 78. The impact to the police secured facility area and parking with number 67, and in the roadway with 119 and 120. As far as 119 and 120, I think personally, I think there was some consideration with this down when the design was going related to roadways. I think that's going to be a significant design change as far as the roadways concerned, so those trees are going to be tough to redesign around because of the courtyard's solid mark and the additional parking spaces and the issues that we have to deal with in the western component in the southern area. I cannot see the impact related to number 78, and I know that this topic of conversation did come up in the CCAC related to what the impact would be to the overall facility, the pipeline component that goes here, and the setback requirements on both sides, and considering the impact. So WRNS, I know, made some degree of, I think we're probably saying, wish there was more, but we are dealing with a site that has a large amount of trees, and that designing around every tree is problematic. 78, obviously, if the building was smaller, that would have been a consideration to save that tree because of the fact the pipeline impact and the secured parking. So I don't think, based on what I'm hearing already, is that 78 is most likely at this point, unless I'm hearing something different, a removal. Transplanting that is just not an option. Number 6, unless that building size is reduced.
You know what she brought up is the fact that it's also in the roadway.
Yeah.
I initially thought that you could kind of, you know how some of our trees are in the middle of our roads now, and it's quaint, you just go around it. Well, our civic transportation engineer said we legally cannot do that with new roads. Is that true?
And you can imagine the liability
No?
of leaving a tree in the middle of the road.
Right. It's a problem.
Thank you.
Do you think it's a problem?
Yeah, huge. Have you ever hit a tree? It's not fun. 67, that obviously has a huge impact to the access point to the secured parking area. I can't see a redesign without huge modifications in the design to that component.
With all due respect, you're not an architect or a visionary about that. Neither am I, but I think that it could be, if somehow they could create another way of managing that.
And I think that we've got a reasonable assessment of what the cost for reshuffling this is, and not only the cost of reshuffling, but also the delay component that's also going to have an additional charge. So I think that 66, I'm glad that staff has taken that to save that, but 67 is right in the middle of the design, and forgive my bluntness, but I wasn't in the CCAC designing that. I mean, these trees.
The tree overlay really did not, come into effect about this. I mean, this is a big surprise to us.
It's a huge impact. So that's something that we would all have to consider would be a huge impact in the design component and the delay component related to the project, no doubt. Again, 119 and 120. And so I think 55 is really, you've got the answer. But we really have to make the decisions related to 119, 120, 78, if there is some, I mean, 85 to 135 is just what they're saying the design is, to design around that, but is that a reasonable assessment for tree 67?
Because it impacts the police department, and there's grading, it is a little bit more involved. So
Yeah.
That's a discussion we'd have to have together with the staff. So we'd have to understand how much we could change, where we could move the parking, essentially eliminating parking from the police department, which we had already done in the previous exercise. If you remember, we really squeezed down their parking, moved some off to the courtyard and beyond, and so this would eliminate at least 3, in my estimation.
I understand that there are 3 parking spaces for a trailer, for these emergency trailers, that are not vehicles, and they're like stored, and they just need to be in a secured area, and I think they could be in a secured area someplace else, and they're only brought in and out on an infrequent basis.
Every 3 or 4 months, yeah.
Every 3 or 4 months.
So taking that comment into consideration, is there, I mean, it seems like if you're removing 3 stalls, is there a way to rechange that act? I mean, I know we're
Just
off the
my
cuff
own
here, please.
comment on that, instead of Pauline, sorry. I think, I mean, we have eliminated all personal vehicle parking within the police secure parking lot. They are now parking outside that lot. There's 8 police vehicles that normally park there on a daily basis that are now going to be parking in our regular public parking lot. They don't like to do that. There's security concerns with police officers in that respect. So with the elimination of those 3 EM trailers, that frees up 3 spots for personal vehicles to park in the police secure parking lot. And they'll figure out a way to get some other vehicles in there if they absolutely need to, but that's where they prefer to park as police officers.
Okay.
And one more thing, Mayor, the
Please.
schedule impacts, even if we don't have CCAC meetings or whatever, you gotta meet with PD and others. From a redesign, are we talking a couple months at least for that?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So that would add another 2 months before we go out to bid. Right now, we're going out to bid sometime in March of 2018.
I couldn't hear that. Could you say it again? What would add 2 months?
Redesign of the police secure parking
Redesign
lot.
for this 67.
Just 67, okay. All right, so let's,
Wait a minute.
Let's vote on
Just
it.
wait a minute.
I'm waiting.
Well, it just seems kind of, it would hold up the entire project?
Can't release a
The
bid set.
entire?
Correct.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do this one tree at a time. It seems like we're going to try to get to a result. Number 78, let's do a poll on the removal of 78. I don't think there's a way around, I think 78, the cost of it is just enormous to that administration.
I don't think we can talk, let's just have it.
Please, go.
I think we're clear on 78.
Okay,
So I think
78.
everyone agrees.
Yes, I'm in favor of
Okay.
removing 78.
Okay, number 119, we're going to avoid 67 for this moment.
I think 119 and 120 would be in the same bucket.
Okay?
I would like to save it. I'd like to try to redesign it and save it.
119 and 120 to save. Mr. Limprist?
I'd be interested in doing it, but, I mean, for me, it's a cost-benefit analysis, and I don't feel like I have a good handle on what the options really
You're
are.
right.
Okay, Bill?
When I walked the site with the city manager and we looked at those specific trees, I felt that they were okay to be gone.
Okay. Rick, please, chime in on 119 and 120 in the roadway.
I mean, I think the only way to save 119 and 120 is to move the road back to where Station Lane is now. Those trees are to the east of the road, and moving the road at that 45-degree angle goes through a whole set of trees. So if we moving the road back eliminates several parking spaces. I'm not exactly sure how many it would eliminate, but it would eliminate a couple anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we have an entire vision here on this plan.
I don't know how long it would take to look at that.
I can't imagine that.
Roadway removal? Any idea on time concept?
I think we could do a noodle in a month.
So within 30 days.
So that would delay the package going out?
Would that delay the bid going out 30 days?
I'm sorry.
It's a small.
Would it delay the bid only if we decided to go in that direction? I mean, if we were to proceed along the assumption that we're not going to do it, but got some information that we looked at and
We can come
said,
back in January with an exact cost and scope of work for that redesign. And then that's it. If you decide to do that, that's where you'll get the schedule impact.
Okay, so can we noodle, I'll use your words, 119, 120, and 67?
Yeah.
So noodle it. That deals with those, and we already know what we're doing with 55, which, so I included 67 because I understand that you guys are interested in changing it, and I hear Mike was as well, so.
What do you mean by noodle?
Well, what does Marty mean by
Well,
noodle?
no, Pauline said
Pauline.
noodle.
What do you
Did think about it.
Noodle-roni?
Very simple pen sketches, not a lot of engineering. Just
Right.
to see if we can.
Well, we need to have an exact cost estimate and schedule it back next month.
And-
These are just ranges right now. I think the council's gonna need the exact costs.
That's really the factor.
But if we noodle it and get our approval of it, and then that could be fleshed out in more robust costs.
Right, I mean, right now, if I could, in my mind, I was revising that road, but the easiest thing to do is to eliminate that parking across, on the west side, and then we can make it work out. So is that's a simple verbal noodle, it does have a significant
Impact of parking.
I'm not in favor of
You're
cutting
talking
the
about
parking.
5, 7 parking spaces across the way?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, no.
Yeah, no.
So that's what I mean by.
Yeah.
There is a very simple solution, it's not without.
Well, I think what the council's asking is, let's come back in January with an exact proposal and cost, scope of work to redesign, to save those trees, and what's it gonna take? And then council in January can decide if they wanna go with that or not, and then we'll talk about the schedule impacts at that point. Because right now, there's no schedule impacts because they haven't approved it.
But Marty, excuse me, through the chair, may I make?
Oh.
But Marty,
Why am I here?
I think that we don't want to just have Pauline design this in a vacuum. I mean, there's got to be some input, like what she just said. Well, we could do this and eliminate these parking spaces. You can't do that, you know? There's got to be a little bit more input. I mean, if you want to appoint an ad hoc committee to maybe work directly with her.
I think we already have an ad hoc committee.
We already have an ad hoc, and we have a town manager and Marty that
Good.
knows what we're looking for.
So we
So
do that.
minimizing the impact, reducing the cost, and that's really the goal. So I think that you've got the general idea what we're looking with. Pauline, you kind of get the gist. These guys and the subcommittee will have the ability to chime in as well, which I know that's impossible to think of, but they will. Rick, please.
So I think what's being asked for is that we get a rough idea, as precise as you can give in the 30 days, of what the cost would be and the time frame impact of both an adjustment for 19 and 20 on one hand and an adjustment for 67 separately. And I think we want to assume that we're not going to do them, so we move forward as if we're going to do the bid on the regular schedule. And I think that we should assume that since this is with the council, that it doesn't need to go back to the CCAC, and you don't have to include in your cost estimates the cost that would be associated with that.
Right. Thank you for that.
Great summary.
That was a very nice summary. So I think that gives everybody a, George, that gives you enough input.
No, they're not asking the architect to spend any additional money at this point, other than the noodle and to come up with a final cost.
Yeah.
Wow, if it's going through legal, we gotta jack our price up. Thanks, Bill. That's what they're worried about. All right, so let's go ahead and close that item, and let's go back to item number 12, which we pulled on the consent agenda. Thank you, everybody, for all. Marty, thank you very much. So anything related to, anybody that has you got it, we'll just move forward. Go ahead,
Anyone not
Beck.
related to item 12 can.
They're trying.
Yeah.
Yes, so.
This is on mine, let me try to.
Please.
So I think I pulled this, and my concern is really more of a process concern.
Yep.
And again, I'm imagining the impact on the Atherton residents who now you've got a homeowner who's got property both Atherton and the county across the street, across the line, I guess. The homeowner's rationally making the decision for development reasons, apparently, to incorporate everything in the county. To me, that means they're expecting to do more things than we would allow in Atherton, and therefore, if I was an Atherton resident, that would bother me, or might bother me. And I feel like we've had no input. I just want to flesh that out for a moment. I apologize for time, by the way.
I think the
Just-
property owners are present if you.
Oh, that's great. Thank
So,
you.
just a footnote, that the development concerns are probably more, let's just hear from the property owners.
Yeah.
Might
I
as well.
apologize you had to sit through all that. I didn't realize you were still here.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I'm
Doris
Hi,
Antrim, my
Doris.
husband Renee. About 2 or 3 years ago, we decided, Renee inherited this when his mother died. His grandfather bought this property, I think in 1928 or 29.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And so it's been there. And
Wow.
all of a sudden, we decided, you know, we're probably not going to live forever, and we don't want to leave this mess for our children. My husband just turned 85 yesterday.
Congratulations.
So we're
Happy birthday.
grateful.
Birthday.
So it's under the sphere of influence of Redwood City. It has Redwood City Schools. It has a Menlo Park address. It's half in the county and half, or a sliver of it is in Atherton. We don't want to leave this for our children because eventually they want to come down. So we went to Stephanie for the town of Atherton. We talked to her for probably 2 years. How do we annex it? How do we do this? Gets very complicated. And then we went to the county and we talked to them. And then we ended up talking to Martha from LAFCO. And she said the simple thing to do is ask for a detachment, because it's just a small part of Atherton, so we can get this solved once and for all, because it's a mess. So we can't do anything. So Martha said she talked to you, the city manager, and you said you talked to staff. And so it was supposed to be on the agenda in October. And so we were prepared to put a presentation together. And then they said, no, it's got to go to planning. So then planning had a month to do it. So then we thought November, here we could go. So November, no, went to finance. So then I called again and they said, it's on this agenda. So I read the agenda and it said, recommendation approved. So we just came to see if it was going to go through. And we had it surveyed, and it's just a small part of Atherton there, and the neighbors don't seem to care one way or the other to do this. So that's what we were trying to do.
Thank you.
To get it straight. So I hope that solves your problem.
Answers my question.
Or-
And the house is in
So the
the
Yeah,
staff
the-
apparently
no, the
has
house is in
done
the
a lot
county.
of conversation
Yeah,
about
the
this
house is
before.
House is on the county side. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Mike, related to it, for us, it's a non-conforming use because it doesn't meet our minimum lot standard. And as far as the process, the county's fees and overall cost may be reduced. I mean, it may be cheaper because the county
No,
tends to
there's
be.
no tax impact. We've never paid out the
Development
tax.
impact, so.
No, there's nothing. That's why she said it's so much
Permits.
easier to go this way than it is to Atherton. Because you're getting no money as it,
Oh, we're getting no money, we know that.
we never paid you any money for that.
Seems to be,
section.
it seems to be the story of our parcel history, so. You have one of
Maybe we
the,
could give you a tree.
I've been in real estate for
Oh,
over 30
yes.
years, and I've only seen one other situation similar to this,
Yeah,
with
It's
multi-jurisdiction.
it's an anomaly.
Yeah, so I hear your burden, and it's, something that will resolve, at least as our part this evening. So, my colleagues, any questions, any additional questions related to this item?
No.
Um,
I'd like to move that we accept.
I think we have a comment.
Bill, please.
So I, like Mike, I brought this up to George as well, because there are a couple Atherton residents that are just on that border, but they're not half and half. And they've come to me and they said, hey, we'd like to build an apartment building here, and say, well, no can do, because our ordinance doesn't allow. And so, I, like Mike, had also said, I think whether or not it is required here, I think in the future, should something like this come up again, which is rare, but I think that we should ask the adjoining neighbors to formally make a comment or say no comment, because, they could be sitting here in a single-family home, and then suddenly somebody builds an apartment building right there, and I just think it will change the value of their property as well, so.
You can't build an apartment building.
I'll answer that question.
Okay.
It's okay. It's actually zone R1S9, which is not a multi-unit zoning. But so that is one of the factors, and actually I think that under the R1S9, the size of the actual development is actually less than it would be for the town of Atherton if it was to be developed. So the overall impact for us, they're actually probably, I don't know what size home, and frankly, it's not really our business. But I think the impact if they wanted to build in Atherton would actually be bigger than if the county's impact, just based on the zoning alone.
Okay.
So, with that, I'm going to. Transparency and absolutely, but this is the cluster, I'm sorry.
I'll second the motion.
You've inherited it, and I am, thank you very much.
Just seconded it.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
So it's resolved today.
Thank you very much.
You're entirely welcome. Oh, and any council reports? I only have one thing to say, is the fire board did reorganization last night, and Virginia Chincarelli is vice president, and Charles is president. All in favor of?
So there's still public comment?
Oh, do you really want to? You didn't get enough? I'm going to go ahead. Oh, sorry. In the interest of time, I was
No,
going to
in
miss
the
that
interest of
last
time,
one.
I will come back
Please.
next month, but I'm really concerned about your parcel tax, and I spent a lot of time studying the results
Yes,
by precinct,
yes.
and there's a message there that's very strong, that you should change the way you elect your council. But I don't want to get into it tonight because we don't.
You mean district-wide?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Not that we're engaging with you. Please, final
Yeah,
public comment.
so my name is Louis Maroney.
Louis.
I work for Assemblymember Mark Berman. I think I've met
Yes.
a lot of people around this table, so
Yes.
that's good. I know I missed the reorganization, unfortunately.
Yes.
So I stuck around here now to give this public comment real quick. Thank you, now Councilmember Lempers, for your service this past year. And congratulations, Mayor Weist. Weist.
Sorry.
Weist.
Yeah, anything.
Yeah, congratulations, Mayor Weiss. Let it be known for the record I pronounced it correctly.
Perfect.
On the year to come, and Councilmember Whitmer as well for being chosen as vice mayor.
Thank you for waiting the entire meeting to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
We
There
probably.
is wine in the other room if you want.
It's required, if you're going to be in politics, you gotta